Welcome to 2025. Welcome to the January Movie Club. I'm happy to have Brand, Steve, James, and Josh here with me to talk about a movie that might find more agreement than the previous animated cat movies that caused quite some controversy in the past. and we're going to talk about Mallrats, a Kevin Smith movie, the second Kevin Smith movie that we're talking about here as part of Movie Club after Dogma. Brand, you submitted that as your nominee, and it won. Can you talk a little bit more where you came from with that pick?
Yes, my thought process for this was it was the 30th anniversary of the movie since it came on 1995. It's now 2025. So I figured why not talk about anniversary to kick off 2025 with Mallrats, a movie I think is underappreciated. Plus, on a little bit of a meta note, I also turned 30 this year. So I also am the same age as this movie. Isn't that neat?
So I was going to bring it up later, but we got to find a new brand. Like he's old. We got to find a new model.
I'm old and busted. You need to get like the new hotness.
I think he's the youngest on here.
Yeah, I know.
Give it a minute. It's going to be like Highlander. No one's going to show up eventually.
I'm like 30, like they were just 29 the whole time.
It's going to be like Logan's Run. I'm getting aged out.
Because, I mean, Torsten being German, I'm just assuming he's like 304.
Yeah, no, there's been a couple of times in my life where I'm like, I can't believe how I overestimate everyone's age. The most obvious one was when I lived in Australia, and I literally like I was 23, 24 at that time, and people my age, like I, there was one situation where like a manager at a place I used to work, I talked to, and then when she saw my age, like my birth year, she's like, "Oh, I'm the same age," and I the whole time thought she's like 35 or something. I started laughing, and then quickly realized that wasn't a joke based on her reaction. But yeah, I know there's some parts of the world where people just age differently.
I'm just happy to say I'm still younger than Rooker, even though probably the next time I watch this, that won't be the case.
Swear that guy's not aged.
You know what? What's funny is like people are like who prematurely bald or prematurely gray. It sucks like in high school, but then it's like you look like you don't age. It's like, wow, he hasn't aged in 40 years. It's like, yeah, because he's been bald the whole time.
Yeah, I think he cut his hair for this part too. That's probably
Probably.
what I remember reading.
Was this anyone's first time watching Mallrats?
No.
I think it was. I can't remember the whole movie, but when I watched it, I actually remembered some scenes, like with the in the audience, like the dating show stuff and all the setup. I was like, I think I've seen it. I've watched scenes of it, but never the whole thing. Um,
I own the soundtrack to this movie.
but I also got to say, that's one of the things we just discovered a couple of hours ago today, that we actually watch different versions, right? So James, I assume you watch the same version as me.
I think so.
I mean, I watched your version, so I, I don't know. That seemed to be the extended version that was 2 hours and 10 minutes long. Brand, you mentioned there's actually the theatrical release that is only 1 hour 35 minutes long.
That's the one that's the only one I've seen.
Yeah, like when
The
I was
one-
very confused when
The one I have is 2 hours, 3 minutes.
Oh yeah, 2 hours.
yeah, I was
3 minutes.
very confused when I was told like, yeah, there's editing cuts in this movie. I'm like, what are you guys watching? Because I'm not seeing that on them. And then I look at my extended cut of it, Blu-ray I have from like 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh,
So-
now I get it. You guys watch the extended cut. I
You
can see why
actually
you
have-
may not like this one afterwards.
I was gonna say, so you guys actually had the scene with like Brody as the neighbor.
Hmm.
And
was
I
like,
wrote that
oh.
actually down under like bad editing. I took some notes as I always do, like like bad editing, and I wrote the scenes down. There's like 1, 2, 3, 5 scenes where you can see clear cuts in the same camera angle, no shift, no nothing. It's like that's amateur level. So that's the extended version that was never planned to be, or maybe never planned to be released, but it was still throwing me off a little bit. It's like, well, wow, that's rookie. Like that's so bad. Like very obvious. I sent one snippet there earlier on Discord, but yeah, like 4 other scenes where it's similar. One time actually has one scene where you have 2 jumps, 2 cut scenes in the same part, and I was like, ooh, that's bad. But I'm glad we talked about it before we're all going and getting confused here. But so 2 different versions. I've never seen a theatrical release then in that case, I assume. Not that I remember. But Brand, you watched both. What's the main difference?
The main difference is the pacing. I'd say the editing, like was mentioned before, because like the pacing of the jokes are a lot better than the theatrical cut and the extended cut. Because the extended cut has like a 30-minute like prologue scene before they even get to the mall, where it extends upon scenes that didn't really get expanded upon, like the TS and Randy scenes. Like there's like a whole different intro in the extended cut than there is in like the theatrical cut. Theatrical cut just kind of gets to the point like they're about to go on vacation. Randy stops them and just basically just lays it all out. And also mentions like the scene for like the reference to Clerks with like the person that died in the casket. Like that never gets mentioned in the extended cut. But it's like something that at least gets referenced in the theatrical cut. Plus, I just think the theatrical cut's just funnier to me. Like a lot of the more jokes land for me more in the theatrical cut than the extended.
So it's not only longer. They didn't extend the theatrical cut. They just changed things up because I don't remember any of the jokes you just mentioned referencing to Clerks. And I actually went back and watched Clerks as well. So my prep work here is Clerks and Mallrats this time.
So the way this works is this is technically the first movie in the timeline because TS tells what's her face that the camera adds 10 pounds. She then swims herself to death because she causes a hernia, like causes an aneurysm in her brain. Clerks takes place the next. I think it's supposed to be the next day, but they go to her wake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not
knocked over the
that's
casket.
not an extended cut, right? Because I can't remember any of that.
In the extended cut, they drive past the quick stop. But that's the only reference you get.
So you watch complete different movies then?
I was gonna say because the theatric cut, they talk about like that's like one of the opening dialogues is them because it's like it's like, oh, she had like the fattest ass in high school. She kept swimming, and then on the like I forget like 94th lap, aneurysm blew up. Yeah. Then you get to see Rooker's ass. Like I don't know what version you all watch.
Yeah, no,
that was in both of them.
I wished no, but you're talking about. I wish I had realized that earlier and watched the actual movie. Because sorry, go ahead, Steve.
So the funny thing about this is that not only was production a little bit odd because Smith basically got a blank check to make this movie from Universal, and we can delve into the behind the scenes later on after we talk about the plot, but as sort of an anniversary release in 2005, we had already had the standard theatrical cut on DVD, but they released a new edition that included the theatrical cut on one side of the DVD and the extended cut on the other side. They even produced new cover art. I believe it's a yellow background instead of a pinkish brown background on the regular DVD. And then in 2020, another company similar to Criterion, I forget the name of the company, they released on 1080p fully remastered Blu-ray, and then last year on 4K, the theatrical cut, the extended cut, and the television cut that used to air on TNT and TBS back in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is a really weird cut since it includes, at least on the TNT version, the alternate opening scene where you meet the governor of the state and find out why Michael Rooker's character hates TS so badly. I mean, he ruined another game show opportunity, but then it also leads into the theatrical opening. So it's even more disjointed than the extended cut is.
I think maybe that's the version then. So maybe we didn't watch the extended cut because yeah, the version I watched had like 15 minutes of the governor's welcoming, where TS is on the roof in his like uniform, and with Brandy like distracts her, and she's like stargazing, and he slaps like his head on the telescope, and she still looks through it. Like, if anyone knows here how telescopes work, you can't slap a telescope and still expect to see the same star.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I wrote. That was my intro to Mallrats. I was like, ooh.
I'm gonna say this. I don't know if we can have movie club because you all didn't do the assignment.
Hey, we can all
seen the movie
about the version. I can all talk about the version that we've seen and kind of compare whether we like it or not. Because yeah, I was a little bit surprised that you all like this movie. I fully expected to have still a controversial movie club, because I hated this one. Like, I rate this
that's the thing. If you're watching the extended cut, I can really see why you don't like why you would like this. Because it is not a good representation of Mallrats.
As Steve just mentioned, there might be a third different cut. I don't know what cut it is. I don't know if you can find out, James, which cut you uploaded there. But it was definitely...
It's on the Blu-ray. It's on the Blu-ray, 720.
So it could be either the extended cut or it could be the television cut, but uncensored, the Arrow released originally back in 2020, which if you like the movie enough to buy on home media, I fully recommend either the Blu-ray or the 4K that Arrow put out, because they did frame by frame remaster on the theatrical cut. They didn't really need to do that on the extended cut because it had already been upgraded when they did the 2005 extended cut, and then eventually released that on a standard Blu-ray.
All right.
Because here's the kind of the copy I had.
Wait, let's just get. Was there a topless psychic in your version?
Yes.
Yes.
With three parts.
That's in every cut.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely still R-rated. There's still I wrote stuff down. I wanted to give you guys crap about complaining about Taxi Driver and how you all have a problem, or at least Josh, you had a problem with the underage girl in Taxi Driver.
So Brand is holding
but
up
this is whole different. This is even
Brand
worse.
is holding up the re-release of the Blu-ray edition that contains the extended cut and the theatrical cut.
Yeah, that seems to be the one. It says 23 extra minutes, 1 hour 35 to 2 hours 3. A little bit more.
Yeah, 2 hours and 3 minutes was the extended cut.
Yeah, that's what I have. 2 hours 3 minutes.
Yeah, because mine is an hour and 35.
Which is the theatrical cut, and which has a much better flow. The extended cut, and I would have to compare notes I've seen from how Kevin Smith has talked about this in the years after, but the extended cut was only shown as a screening to Universal. They found it to be too long and disjointed. They wanted something more compact, like Clerks, which was, of course, the project that got him this pretty much blank check from Universal to do basically whatever he wanted for them. And it wound up being cut to that hour and 35 minutes version, which works a hell of a lot better.
So the first takeaway here, anyone watching the movie club, is like, make sure you watch the right movie. Check the runtime, I guess, if it doesn't have any other labels on it.
James, first of all, I noticed you moved my cover from your background, so that was your first strike.
And also, physical media is king still, because you get both versions.
Snoochie boochies, you sure do.
The problem here is it goes back to it not being available on streaming. So you have to buy it.
Or you could do like I do and ripped all my DVDs to Dropbox.
Yeah, but you didn't have the full
enough.
You still have to own the DVD to do that.
But if the disc still works, might as well still use it.
I will say, and we can delve into how it was received later on, how the box office was. It doesn't seem to matter which cut they had put in theaters, which was a theatrical cut. It still would have garnered some amount of controversy, as Clerks to a certain extent did back in the day.
Yeah, budget 3.1 million, box office 2.1 million, so it lost 4 million.
But no, his money made money.
I was gonna say, I think it's because it found like a cult following. Because I watched this when I was like 16, 15. Like, that's a weird thing for me. I remember watching this and being like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I get a little bit older. Cause they like, I always got the idea they were like early 20s, late teens.
Mm-hmm.
That's the life you wanted to live.
Dude, like,
Nothing wrong with.
well, no, because it was one of the, you know what it was? Because it's like everyone knew everyone and you're all hanging out at the same place. And it's what's kind of also weird because like Ben Affleck's character is technically working. He doesn't work like that full day. Like he got paid. He didn't do shit.
Nope.
One of the advantages of being the owner of Fashionable Men.
The manager, thank you.
The proprietor of this joint.
And here's the thing too. I will not like this is an enjoyable movie. I have some nostalgia. I wouldn't say like this is a great script, well written. It's like, it's fun. It is
It's
a bowl of
charming.
ice cream with sprinkles. It's like it's not a full meal, but it's fun.
Yeah. Me, I watched Clerks first. I watched Kevin Smith movies. I watched Clerks first, but I watched Mallrats afterwards, and I actually think I enjoy Mallrats just a little bit more, just a hair more. But that's just also my own preference. Like I'm pretty sure if you ask me any day of the week, which I like better, Clerks or Mallrats, I'd probably say Mallrats now. But if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably say Clerks.
There's a huge tonal difference between this film, Clerks, and even Chasing Amy and Dogma. That was honestly what attracted me to Smith as a filmmaker when I first started getting into his productions, because as I've mentioned in previous movie clubs, I didn't watch R-rated movies growing up. My first encounter with Kevin Smith was through his Daredevil and Green Arrow runs. Then I found out that he was a filmmaker. So Clerks was the first film that I wound up watching. I bought the thicker DVD pack when I was working at Best Buy. I think it was $17.94 with the employee discount, and loved it. So the next day I bought the pink background edition of Mallrats, and found out the next year they were releasing the extended cut. Later in 2004 they'd released Clerks X, so I got to see the director's cut or original cut of that, and the rest is basically history. Each of these View Askew-averse movies kind of has a different tonal vision, but they flow rather well together as long as you're watching the right cut. I don't think this flows very well into Chasing Amy or Dogma if you watch the extended cut. And if you start off with Clerks as your first movie, following those characters doesn't really work too well if you go off of Smith's original ending for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I can't believe you
I
guys
never
watched
really
Long
think
Bird.
about watching movies like in a timeline sense, because like it didn't click for me that the next movie was Chasing Amy until I saw at the end credits Jay and Silent Bob will return and Chasing Amy. I'm like, oh yeah, that is the next movie that comes out after this one. I forgot about that.
It was originally it was supposed to be Jay and Silent Bob with the
The
orangutan.
monkey.
Yeah,
Man, yeah.
that's not a monkey. That's an ape.
Same.
Nope,
Did
monkey's got
dirty
tails. I will boot you off this thing. I'm not hosting. Torsten, boot him
Go
off.
ahead, it's fine.
But I love that this flows into Chasing Amy, despite the fact that Gwen, Joey Lauren Adams' character, is a relatively minor role. She's not the main focus in this movie. It sets her up and makes her interesting enough, and
but
kind
those
of
were
helps you.
she's
Go
two
ahead.
different characters, isn't she?
No,
she's the same one.
character, because she references the promiscuous behavior that is mentioned about her offhandedly by what's his face, the dick jock in Clerks, which takes place after this. And that promiscuous behavior, of course, is the focal point of conflict in Chasing Amy. I love that this didn't make enough money to really convinced Smith that he needed to return to a more art house style because he was able to use his relationship with the studio and Scott Mosier's pool with different financiers to leverage Clerks to make Chasing Amy and use Joey Lauren Adams, who he was dating at the time of producing Mallrats, to be the main star of that one.
Also, what's weird is like art does imitate life because like this movie feels like a very like 80s kind of sitcom, a little grosser, a little like 90s humor and dish the trish. But it's like the fact that like it's also kind of crazy because God, this movie's 30 years old. But you also have references to like, oh, they're remaking the dating game. It's like, yeah, we've been remaking stuff that's older than yeah, it's kind of crazy.
I think they
How
mentioned
these
going back
remake
to the
good
70s.
shows?
Well, all the stuff when I grew up, all the stuff was canceled on TV, like Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, all of that. Like those shows were canceled at in the late '90s, early aughts. And when I moved to the US, I was like, they're still on, like they're still thing here, aren't those '80s shows or something like? But it seems to not go out of fashion for some.
I think he wrote this like in a weekend because there's certain like because I like them, but the Jay and Silent Bob parts are very much Looney Tunes, like almost to a T.
Definitely
Oh.
Roadrunner and like Wile E. Coyote.
You got the whole Brody and TS, which what's also interesting is so Clerks, you know, he found like the right cast. They all kind of worked out. I like TS, but he like London does not do the best job with Kevin Smith's dialogue. He's always kind of clunky with it.
What's weird to me is I can't imagine anybody else playing the character though, because I think the studio wanted Mike Myers, like different actors like contemporary from this time, to play TS. And like I can't imagine Mike Myers saying these kind of lines though.
No, it before London was recommended by Mosier and eventually agreed upon by Smith and Universal. Henry Thomas was one of the finalists alongside Mike Myers, and Jason Lee wound up beating out both Adam Sandler and Steve Zahn for the role of Brody, which is amazing.
And
Also-
this might blow your mind, but Jason Mewes had to audition to play Jay, and he was going to get replaced by Seth Green. So I'm like, imagine what this movie would have been
Yeah.
like if Seth Green was Jay.
Also,
It was going to be Seth Green or Breckin Meyer, who's
Oof.
best known for Road Trip.
also,
It's like I can't imagine any like the mannerisms that like Jay is like known for in these movies ever coming out of Seth Green.
no,
Just the physicality of Jay, it works so well with Jason Mewes and the comedic arrogance that he brings to that role. It wouldn't work with anyone else.
Although within the same universe, you kind of have to have continuity there.
Yeah, it's
But
not like Harry
studio
Potter where
executives-
you can have a different Dumbledore every movie.
can I talk?
Yes,
No.
you can.
Sorry.
I was going to say the other crazy thing is My Name is Earl wouldn't be the same without this movie.
Yeah, Ethan is awesome in this movie.
Especially because good for him, but man, he lost so much weight because he used to be like, oh, funny big fat guy, get him. And he does not look this like in all the good ways. He is a shadow of his former self. Also, the problem too is Jay is Jason, like because I remember Kevin Smith being like, no, he says all that shit. Like that's not a character, that's him.
Like you can't technically write that kind of character to be like charming if it's played by somebody else. Like you can't have
sober,
Seth Green
all
say the
these
same
years-
things.
Yeah. Even sober, all these years later, according to Smith, with their renewed friendship, he is still that way.
I was gonna say, and the other thing is, I kind of miss with the older View Askew. You had a completely different cast, almost like a different genre of film, but then it's like you just had Jay and Silent Bob in the background to kind of string them together. Because like now we got like Clerks, Clerks 2, Clerks 3, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Again, and it's
The
like,
reboot. I enjoyed the reboot.
which I still haven't watched it, but it's one of those things. I'm just saying, I would almost like, it's kind of weird. It's like, we can't get a new Kevin Smith because there's talks about like a Mallrats 2 where I'm like, how?
So, funny thing about Mallrats 2, that obviously was not something that was really talked about after this theatrical release because it was a box office bomb, but it gained a cult following much in the way Clerks had, even though Clerks was a success story, thanks in no small part to Chasing Amy and Dogma, that renewed interest and the hype for Kevin Smith. So Mallrats was something that got kind of carted along with the rest of his catalog. As early as 2011 or 2012, because it was on comingsoon.net and a few other websites that Kevin Smith did direct interviews with. He was talking about doing a sequel to the point that he had talks with all of the cast members. They agreed to it. And then he was going to launch a Kickstarter to fund the film. At the time, he wasn't money rich after losing out on the box office that Cop Out did not achieve and Red State. So he was going to Kickstarter that. It kind of fell through. So in 2015, that was the next talk where it was going to be a sequel called Mallrats. In 2017, it popped up again as Twilight of the Mallrats. Since then, we've had talks, but we've never gotten to the point where there's been official studio confirmation. We, at this point, have official confirmation of Jalen Silent Bob 3 being the next View Askew first film. But everyone who's surviving of the Mallrats cast is still 100% on board all of these years later to do a second
All but
one.
one.
I thought he also confirmed he did. But he also, Kevin Smith did talk about Dogma too, right? And that's also in the plan.
Right after Jay and Silent Bob 2.
So there are so many other movies in line already to be produced first, to be made first. So it feels like if there's a Mallrats 2, that's so many years out that so many things can change until then as well.
Well, all I ask is if we do eventually get Mallrats 2, there needs to be a purpose behind it. It shouldn't just be a nostalgia flick like Jay and Silent Bob reboot is, which I enjoy, but it's not his best quality film. And even though I understand why Clerks 3 is the way it is, it's a reflection of how he processed his trauma. Clerks 3 is bottom tier for me with his Askewverse films. I want Mallrats 2, if it ever comes, to come from a place of let's not do this just to do it. There's an intent behind it. Let's have some fun.
Well, now, if they do have a Mallrats 2, would Brody still be the talk show host for the Tonight Show?
Whoa, good sir. Man, amateur hour. He lost that gig, took the money, and made the comic book shop that is in Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back.
Fair enough. I'm going by what the standalone movie is, and we're just going to count as Mallrats 1 and Mallrats 2.
Now, knowing my luck, Kevin Smith will see this because I'm just about to say this. The other problem was because after Jay and Silent Bob, I was like, well, I'm now mature. I'm a real filmmaker. Screw all these dick fart stoner jokes. I'm going to go make real movies. Those all failed, and it's like, well, Silent Bob's back.
I feel like this is how it started. So a little bit what you talk about there, Steve, with the purpose. Again, I watched the extended cut, so that's different, I guess. But to me, that movie didn't have too much of a purpose. And it was just a random collection of not so funny jokes where I was missing a little bit part, the smartness, the cleverness of Clerks. So again, watching Clerks, again,
You know,
there was a theme. There was like those smart ideas that connected things, intertwined things happened for a reason. Or when stuff happened, there was an effect to it, cause and effect, and in a way, whether it was comical, philosophical, or whatever, but there was some sense to it. Again, extended version of Mallrats, that was lacking all of that. Again, I did not like this movie at all, but there might be the cut. But at least for
no.
this cut, it was tough to watch. Like halfway through, I probably would have switched off if it wasn't for the movie club.
You know what this is? This might be American humor versus the rest of the world because we have a couple international friends on NMC, and man, there have been a couple times where like I don't get how you all think this is funny. This is just juvenile and.
Don't get me wrong. I think the funniest scene in the entire movie is when the Easter Bunny gets beaten up. So I kind of get the get the sense of humor, but it was just some things weren't even funny. So some things were illogical. Like the scene with the cops when they stopped them. It's like, why is no one chasing him? Like the whole arrest scene. That was tough to watch because none of that made sense. No one would act like that.
Wait a minute.
I got a good chuckle out of them going to the lesser mall, and TS is picking up like hats. He picks up the one for like Clerks, puts it on, realizes what it is, and just like disgustingly throws it away. I love that little visual gag.
Also, wait, Torsten, which time they got arrested? Was it when they were getting framed with pot or the end?
They're getting framed with the pot, yeah, when he pulls out the pot, and not necessarily a framing, but like, I don't know. I already forgot like how it all unfolded, but
there's two things. They're not cops, they're mall security guards, so they have no authority. So they have to call, like, they can't make an arrest. They have to call the cops.
But they say you're arrested. They arrest him for like no reason technically, and then the police, they don't follow Jay. I think Jay knocks out LaForce as well, and then the police actually doesn't follow him. And I don't know.
It's a couple things. One, because LaForce pulls out the weed and is going to frame them. Jay knocks him out. Then we got Jarrell, son of blah, blah, blah. Neil before Zod runs away. Keep in mind, anytime Jay and Silent Bob pop up, it's a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. So don't view this as like, wow, this street cracking, noir film. It's like, no, add Hanna-Barbera sound effects.
In Clerks, it was integrated way better. I don't know. In Clerks, they were integrated better. There was like kind of the mirror that was held up against them. It's like, you're just those dope dealers outside. Like, we can't take you seriously, until they realized they're doing the same thing, just legally inside with the cigarettes. But so I don't know. You can't say every time they show up. Maybe every time they show up in this movie, yeah.
Like I said,
also in Dogma, they also have a little bit more of a purpose when they show up.
Like I said, both of those films are a better meal. Chasing Amy's a better meal. This is dessert. This is pure sugar. This is pure like.
This is for me like I compare this like if we had to watch something like Biodome, I'd be miserable watching that movie because
get him out of here.
Biodome.
No one brings up Biodome.
Here's the thing. I'm making a point. The reason why I brought up Biodome is because I feel like it creates a lot of like sophomore antics that you find in movies like Mallrats and does them bad. It makes it too obnoxious throughout most of the movie. Whereas this actually knows how to pace itself better, at least for the theatrical cut. Extended cut, you can go for it. But like theatrical cut, I think they pace it so much better, like for the jokes.
That's probably the other thing, because it's like, even in the theatrical cut, it's not the best pace. And there does come a point, especially at the end, where you're kind of like, yeah, we need to start wrapping this up. Because even the plot feels like, yeah, we need to start wrapping this up. So I can't imagine having like another 40 minutes. It's like,
Yeah, an hour and a half is what this needs to be.
I will also say that even though the extended cut is the inferior version, there are things that I wish Smith had put his foot down with and kept in the theatrical cut. There are a few visual gags and a few lines that flow a little bit better with the theatrical cut had they left certain parts of the extended in. Just as an example, toward the end, you see Borgasm's book signing and you see LaFour kiss on top of the head. Well, that could be a fatherly affection. No, if you watch the extended cut, LaFleur was actually distracted by her. She used him as one of her subjects for Borgasm.
Oh,
Okay.
that's not in the actual release. Because I was
No.
like, yeah, LaFleur, he is
Nope.
LaFleur is like 50 and she's what, 15? And
See,
that was made very clear in the movie that they had a go. Like, well, she basically what was the count? 150, 200, 250? I don't know. They mentioned the count that was her research was at. And they were all adults. So it's like
Mhm.
this 15-year-old.
Yeah,
And
it,
yeah, as you
it
said
was
on camera,
statutory with every single participant in her study.
And
Which
stuff like that does
led
not
to-
age well. But
I was
that's
gonna
also
say,
like
No,
30
I'm
years
not-
ago humor.
I'm not defending this, but the book was from 14 to 30.
he was,
It was, yeah.
LaForce was not 30.
No, that was
Sorry.
and also, Stephen, I like how you're like, it could have been fartherly. It's like, look, I've never seen the extended cut. I know that wasn't farther. Like,
no, it's not. Obviously, that didn't age well. To a certain extent, the stuff with Shannon, Ben Affleck's character, didn't age well. I'm not a fan of essay or rape jokes, but I am accepting of that final joke specifically because he was an asshole. He made it perfectly clear he had no hesitation to violate people in an uncomfortable place and not in the back of a
you mean like the back of a Volkswagen?
yeah, so that to
Come on.
me, even though it could be controversial to say, that's instant karma right there. He's
You're not
gonna
supposed to punch the guy in police custody. Oh, come on, just once. Fine. Ugh.
Yeah, because that's illegal. I we're kind of jumping around. I do like at the very end though, they do that quick because like one, it's very like have you all seen Animal House?
yeah.
Yes.
It felt like a tribute to those kinds of movies. I loved that.
I honestly had a feeling Torsten was going to shake his head no, because yeah, there's a lot of nods to Animal House, like a lot of nods.
Revenge of the Nerds also is like one where it's like,
yeah.
boy, does that not age well at all?
Yeah, because well, even like the whole the R word, that's like socially not acceptable. There's a lot of things that are just like after 30 years, you're like, yep, that's different.
This is definitely a film that's the product of its time. That doesn't make it a bad movie by keeping those things in. And we've talked about it before. Censorship is one of the worst things out there. Instead of censoring things, just learn from what didn't work, what's now not acceptable, and move forward. Put in, if it's a book, put in, hey, this is a product of its time. This is not how we view things anymore. But this to me was a tribute to the raunchy comedies of the 70s and 80s, even referencing, as we've talked about, those game show aspects of it. And to Josh and Brand's point, Revenge of the Nerds was referenced even in just the visual gags, because Silent Bob swinging down, missing his target, and ending up between the legs of the woman on the advertisement.
One thing I want to point out too, I loved all the different sign shops. Like there were so many jokes because like the pet stores
Rugged
had
Munchers.
gerbils, carpet munchers, buy me toys. Like just the fact that it's like, I'm like, yeah, that feels like a fake. And like I said, I do love like Dogma and all these films, but it feels like now all we get is Mooey, the cow.
Well, it's like
movie, yeah.
Simpsons, like it's like Simpsons era, like visual gags where like you see like stores like in the background that have like there's like shops you never even go see and go in. There's like you'll see like a restaurant on there that have like that kind of like visual gag to it. That just makes it kind of like, oh, that's something to laugh at. Nothing to be taken seriously.
Hell, even Stan Lee with his appearance in this movie, it's a reference to the old Stan Lee from the 70s when he did radio shows or some television interviews in the 70s. He's got that full beard. And the most well-known photo of him after that period in the 70s is when he posed naked for Playboy with that Incredible Hulk comic over his crotch. So seeing him with
as well as
awesome.
As well as American Graffiti with Wolfman Jack, with that legendary broadcaster who's like shows up at the end, gives advice, same like Stan Lee does in this movie. It's Kevin Smith paying back what influenced him, essentially.
Because that's the other thing with this movie. It's definitely a lot of, in some ways, it's like Kevin Smith's childhood, because like I honestly think his hope was like, cool, I made Clerks, I can make my money back, so I'm not bankrupt, and then I'll go find like a real job. Like I don't think everyone hopes, but he didn't really expect for it to like take off as it did. So when they offered him Mallrats, he's like, it's like, come up with a story in a weekend.
Apparently, Walt Flanagan, which is a friend of his, was the inspiration for Brody, the soda cup and everything, which I thought was a neat touch. Because, like, yeah, I've seen comic book men enough to like put that together that Brody's basically Walt Flanagan.
I think he tried. There was too many things that went into Brody. Like I guess, yeah, what you mentioned, Steve, the jokes and it's a product of its time. That's not what made it a bad movie. To me, what made it a bad movie was the incomplete characters. Like Brody, first and foremost, like to me, he felt super like flat, and like just incoherent. Like he's super lethargic, can't get his ass up, can't get anything like get excited about. But then, well, he loves them all. Like he's super happy when he got there. I've never seen anyone in my life being so happy to be in a mall, to enter the mall. It's like, I love this. Like it's the best thing in the world. He wants to then parent random kids because they're running around. He's like, oh my God, like they have to be kept safe on the escalator. But then he completely mistreats his girlfriend and doesn't give a crap about her. So it's just like, make up your mind, dude. Like those random kids are more important than your girlfriend, and the mall is so exciting, but you can't get out of bed. Like I'm sorry, like the character of Brody was to me so incomplete. Again, maybe the scenes in the extended cut, but like to me, it made no sense.
He is a little bit more evolved on the extended cut, but not enough. I feel like TS was a little bit better developed because TS's conflict in his relationship, I feel, was more selfless than Brody's conflict.
He wanted to be accepted by the father, but it was straightforward. Like he tried to gain the approval by his future father-in-law. Like that was straightforward. Like you got from TS what you expected to get.
That's kind of
most of it was a misunderstanding too, because like happenstance that like his gun in extended cut gets caught in like Brandy's hair and then fires at the governor, which is just insane hijinks there in the first place. It's like that's never in the theatrical cut at all. They only reference it like, maybe a little bit, but that's
also
it.
very Looney Tunes with that aspect too.
In the
like
theatrical
your hair stuck on the trigger.
In the theatrical cut, like TS has no love for the dad. Like he hates that SOB. And they bring up the governor thing once. Like the executives go, you don't want the same thing to happen. Which in some ways it's like, yeah, I don't need to know the full story. Also, the thing with Brody, because I grew up around guys like him. It's like it's more, yeah, the big thing in his life is hanging out the mall because he controls that space. He knows where every inch is. He knows how to like where to get free, refills. Because that's the other thing with Shane. He hates Brody because he just hangs out at the mall. So it's a kind
and like, sorry,
but it's the kind of thing. It's like I get it, especially because I always kind of feel like with Brody, he likes his life where like he wants to encapsulate his life here, and he's kind of worried like it's going to get ruined. Especially it's like why I think he doesn't introduce her to his mom because he's worried that's like, okay, this is all going to fall apart. Where it's like TS is rushing for the future because it's that weird period where it's like they're out of high school. And it's like, because I get the idea like Brody's working, he's not going to college.
Yeah.
That's Renee, right? Renee's, yeah, both of them, Brody and Renee. to me, they were like, because Renee also, she's not like none of them behaves how you would expect. It's like this situation where you're a little bit annoyed by how they behave and what decisions they make, because to you it makes no sense. Like when Brody picks her up and carries her into the elevator, she's not even screaming. It's like, who would not scream? She didn't even see him, right? Like she didn't know who was. She just gets kidnapped and it's like super silent.
That one I always assume like he saw her, like she saw like the reflection or like I don't know. It's like I'm trying to justify this movie, but it's like they've been together forever, so it's like maybe she recognizes his smell, his touch, something.
So that didn't really bother me because I feel like him or him trying to get with her in the elevator was just more so like him just trying to prove that she was jealous or trying to make him jealous of Ben Affleck's character, Shannon, I think it was. Like just trying to make him jealous. Like I think that was the whole point of it.
Yeah, perhaps there was no cameras in there.
I don't know why. I kept thinking it went up. I forgot.
It did go up for him.
Well, yeah, but I just forgot that it's like because it's a weird cut. Like it's not the end of the world. I've seen worse cuts, but you have like the giant crowd outside. Then when the elevator finally opens up, there's no one else out there except for Shane and TS.
In the extended cut, they'd have like a weird like brief thing where like, oh, I recognize you. You're on TV with like the governor's ball. Didn't you try and snipe the governor? And like, and everybody just kind of backs away slowly. Like, oh, come on, it wasn't my fault. And that's a running gag throughout the movie. It's like, yeah, that wasn't a theatrical cut either. I'm like, I just keep seeing bits and bits where I don't recognize the theatrical cut, making like it's probably a good cut.
Also, the little thing when Ethan goes, Brenda, like that's a
Yeah.
funny joke if you know that joke. Because Torst, I'm guessing you didn't know that joke, right?
I don't even know who was Ethan.
William
sailboat.
with the sailboat.
The sail. Yeah, we got to talk about the sailboat as well. But yeah, well, explain the joke for a second.
So I forget which show it was, like Dawson's Creek or something. She was a big character in one of those shows. Her character's name was that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
So
it's Beverly
Kevin
Hills
Smith-
Beverly
90210.
Hills 90210.
That's it. So Kevin Smith's like,
never
call
watched
her
that.
this character that she just quit the show on, because that's a real human reaction from her. Because he doesn't know why, like he's never seen the show. So when she's like, "Dick," that was a real like human reaction.
And it's rumored that Smith put him up to that
yeah.
joke too. And I could totally see that because he's infamous for these early movies creating the opportunity to ad-lib or to troll other people on set.
Also, man, speaking of product of its times, the credits.
Yes.
Oh, y'all
I don't know.
Torsten slacked. He did not look up Gaijin Studios.
I don't know if I don't. I would have to. Are the credits different in the extended? Probably not, but I don't. Also, I don't think I watched the credits.
The opening credits are all various comic book covers.
The opening. Oh yeah,
You said the end of it.
I said opening. I said credits. You just assumed I meant end because I said credits. But all of them are famous artists because they have J. Scott Campbell, Dave Johnson, Mike Allred, Adam Hughes, Brian Stelfreeze, Jason Pearson twice, and I think Savage Dragon guy. I think he was in there.
Eric Larson.
I think he was in there.
Yeah, this movie is like I love its tributes to comic books like that. That and the Stan Lee stuff. I'd like, yeah. Sometimes we make fun of like comic book fans or stuff like that, but then it's also like it's just like self-deprecation humor. I don't really feel like it's like take that nerds. It's more so like, hey, I'm also there with you guys in that kind of aspect. Because why else would you have comic book artists do your opening credits for you?
Yeah, but so the credits don't start until like 13 minutes in. So I guess the opening scene is 13 minutes, 12 and a half, 13 minutes long, just all just about the governor and TS on the roof with.
So wait, do they have
Brandy?
The opening? There's
the comic book covers, yeah. Brody Man.
Yeah, but wait, do they have the
Brandy,
gerbil story?
I assume the credits are just the same. I don't know. It's like angry pop comics. I don't know. To me, it was just fun comic book covers, the bulk instead of the Hulk.
Well, my thing is, because when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, cool, it's comic book covers." For me, fast forward later in life, when I rewatched it again, I'm like, "I know him, I know him, I know him, I know them. Haven't met them." Because it's like I said, they're still around. It's just crazy to see actual artists. Also, so wait a minute, did the extended one start off with the whole gerbil 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 story?
No, let's see. No, I thought
No,
Nah,
they don't reference that
that's,
story in the extended cut.
no, I can't
The
remember. There
opening is all
was
the governor stuff.
like
Real
13 minutes of the governor's charity, how the was it Brandy's or Renee's father? No, Brandy's father loses his grant because his daughter helps involuntarily, like, yes, shoot at the governor with blanks, but like so he loses the it kind of sets up the story, I guess, of why he hates TS. And
so
boy, he hates them before, but this like kicks it over because he loses the grant, he loses his company through that, and like his life is basically turned upside down because of TS. And that's the first 13 minutes. But it's outside of a mall, it's at the banquet outside in a courtyard. It's like, to me, it was like, again, watching Clerks and watching Mallrats, like this is not even close to what is this, like a Spy Kids type of story or like.
So in the theatrical, you get a story from Brody. It's basically like a giant sex joke about his cousin Walt. Um, but I feel like the other thing with that, it feels like one of these kinds of things. It's like, look, if you don't find this funny, just hop off now. It then goes into the credits. It's literally like less than a minute,
It
and then it's
sets the
TS.
tone right
Yeah,
there.
Yeah.
then TS pulls up to the house. So that's how the theatrical goes.
Yeah, it was not part of that.
Yeah.
It really is like watching two different movies. It's kind of insane. Like they had the similar scenes, but it's like the pacing for the theatrical is way better because it just gets right to the chase. It doesn't take 30 minutes to get to the mall. It takes like at least 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's like they're there and like, yeah. Because I think the other thing is, yeah, because if you slow it down, yeah, I could see that being a couple issues. Because like, yeah, because the escalator thing, it's just more of a funny bit where it's like the kid's back on the escalator.
And then the kid actually gets hurt on the escalator, making Brody's point right.
Little
Like I see stuff happen like at least once a year.
But if you spend like, yeah, 30 minutes setting up some of this stuff, I can see where it's like, okay, what was that all? It's like, what was that all for?
And I
Seemingly
like how
not
that
only
Walt
setting
joke.
it up.
I like how that Walter joke with the gerbil also gets foreshadowed later, or called back to later because of Walter on the plane.
Well,
And
did you
everybody's talking to.
also when he recruit Jane Silent Bob, it says gerbil, gerbil, gerbils.
Yep.
Now, Smith and Lee have both talked about how he became involved in this. You know, Freeze, Josh. Have you ever had conversations about how he or the other artists were
Have
able to
I?
contribute?
So this is how that happened. Adam Hughes is from Jersey. Kevin Smith's from Jersey. I forget when they meet out. They met at like some con or something. Basically, Adam Hughes is like, "Yeah, we can work on this." Hey, studio, aka Gaijin Studios, because that's where Dave Johnson, Pearson. I don't know. Adam Hughes. There were a couple others. They were all part of the Gaijin Studios. So because Selfridge is like, yeah, I agree to do it. He's like, I had no idea who Kevin Smith was. He's like, I kind of went off their notes because they're like, do an X-Men one with this. Like, I think he had a headshot. He's like, okay. So it's like until he saw the movie. Because the other thing is, what's weird is Mike Allred does one, and he's also featured in Dogma. Because I bring that up because he's Mormon.
I always wondered because with Smith coming back into prominence, he's been reflecting, especially with the release of the what is it, the 420 or the 430 movie that came out last year. he's been feeling his age and reflecting on his career. So he's talked a little bit more in depth than he had in the past about involving Stan Lee. But when it comes to these featured artists, which I feel sets a bigger tone for the pop culture and the comic book community with those credits more so than the reference to the Punisher War Journal later on.
Well,
which is a good issue,
really
by the
cool.
way.
the other crazy thing is 94, so it's like I could be off on my years. That was like either right before the crash or like because when
That
was the
was a
crash?
little bit before, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of
Like
like
95 had been like right before. What's funny is they reference DC versus Marvel in this too, because they like Renee goes like, I don't care about your two different company or comic book companies having the crossover. Something to that effect. Like they're different chromium covers.
there it is. No, so it's because I think too, it's like they were how to put this because like I don't think J. Scott Campbell. When did Danger Girl come out? So he might have just like
In the 90s.
oh thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know. I'd have to
Crazy.
look that up. I just thought it was really cool to not only have the shenanigans, but this really is steeped in the time that this was filmed. There's so much that's very 90s about it, and 70s nostalgia was kind of creeping into the 90s. So it fits with the theme of Smith paying tribute to the 70s and some of the 80s films as well.
And a little bit ahead of his time too, because this is only 5 years away from Stanley cameoing in X-Men.
Oh yeah.
And then that just being a cameo cycle until he passed away.
So I actually
Yeah.
I got a list here because they had Ethan Van Sciver, and let's tell you when this came out. Mike Allred, Joe Quesada, and Jimmy Palmiotti, Chuck Frazier, Jay Lee, and this is some old stuff. Kirk Van
That's-
Warmer, Jason Pearson, Dave Johnson. Oh, the Fantastic Two was Colleen Hamner. Okay, now we're getting into that's Gaijin Studios. Adam Hughes, J. Scott Campbell with inks by Alex Grainer, and then Brandon Peterson for the actual poster.
It's funny how things cycle, Josh, because all of those artists were big in the 90s and kind of had a bit of a lull, except for Cully, who came back strong with the revamped Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes during the Infinite Crisis. And Peterson's had a comeback lately, too.
Has he? He died 2 years ago.
He's not
He's a
working
ghost
in the
now.
industry anymore, but his work is being better appreciated, is what I mean.
Sure. Well, because it's like Pearson, Dave Johnson, Stelfreeze, Cully, and Adam were all Gaijin Studios. I mean, Dave Johnson's never stopped. He's been doing covers like strong ever since. Brian Stelfreeze did the Black Panther with Talladega Coates. Also, it's interesting because Joe Quesada, this would have been before he became the editor in chief at Marvel.
This was even before I think Bill Jemas brought him into Marvel.
And
Yeah, this is before Marvel Knights.
I think his first big thing, yeah, I was about to say brand was Daredevil Marvel Knights, and I think that was 97 or 98 when that started off.
And this, I'm curious.
Around 98, 98, 99? I want to say 98.
I think Jimmy Palmiotti was also a part of that team up, but like this might have been one of their first projects together. Also, this was 98 is when Danger Girl came out, so this is like J. Scott Campbell's really new.
Yeah,
So
Quesada went to Marvel in 98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Torsten. So Danger Girl's about to hit the 30-year mark too. Shit, I'm old.
Well, like I said, it's interesting because like Jay Lee's been working this whole time.
Brandon is like, what?
Welcome to the party, pal.
Well,
Believe it or not, despite this boyish face, I'm gonna be 40 next Valentine's Day. So
no. Brand's the oldest one here.
He just
This
I have
was
the
has,
in
gray hair to
98,
prove
so
it.
it's still.
You can't see it. 'cause
he has an old soul, and I think that's wonderful.
That was
Still 3 years
absolutely
until the
do.
30th. Yeah.
that was
Going
one
back
thing.
to you guys talking about it being like a complete 90s movie, I think it's everything. Like not only the art, the comic, the creators. I mean, yes, Stanley could have been also a more recent film, but the mall itself, like I think that was more the early odds that malls really exploded. So in the 90s, there was also very, I guess Clerks was more like, yeah, there was still a convenience. So that was more a movie of its time. Well, putting a movie in the mid 90s in a mall, I guess, again, I don't know, growing up in Germany, the mall, it's really only exploded in the early odds, the late 90, like 99, maybe early odds. I guess in the US a little bit earlier because then the rest of the world adapted it. But putting a movie in a mall already in 95, or the production towards it, like probably a year prior, thinking of that was right at the trend, right? Like that was the new thing, the malls, and like but kind of having your social circle in a mall. But not only that, I mean, we can talk about the mall a little bit before we then jump into the 3D pictures that also were so 90s. If there's one thing that's 90s, it's probably Trolls. Those little, like, and they made 2 or 3 troll movies about it. But also those 3D pictures, I almost forgot about them until I came back in that movie, or like watched the old movie and where that had stuff of its time. It's like that was the biggest thing ever. Like in the 90s, you had it in any newspaper, any magazine had like at least one 3D picture that you're supposed to stare at.
Oh, the Magic Eyes, yeah.
Whatever it's called, yeah.
So the malls exploded like in America in the 80s. That mall actually went out of business, and hence how they could film it. Because, so the way Clerks worked, Kevin Smith worked there, but he only could film at night when the store was closed. Hence why they did the scene with the shutters, because it's like, all right, we don't have to explain the daylight. Yeah, because what's weird is like, I swear there's a Suncoast in there. Because it looks like it had the same lighting and just like a bunch of DVDs. It's like, I miss you.
Bro, I thought the same thing. This is definitely a '90s mall. The first film that really made the mall its own character, to my knowledge and with my experience with films, was Dawn of the Dead, and I think that was 1978. But that was more used as a character to represent commercialism, whereas in Mallrats, the mall is its own character and it's supposed to represent community and a sense of fun. In the 90s,
yeah, I'm talking more about the 90s mall, like I mean, malls have been around for hundreds of years as like just a assembly of stores, but like actually a spot for the youth to hang out, where you go after school, where you meet your friends, like that's, again, to me, that's more a 90s thing, but it could have been different in the US, I guess, or was different.
I do like their interpretation, like the smaller mall they go to for like the psychic, the topless psychic. Like I've been to malls like that.
The flea market.
And they're definitely around here in Ohio where like there's like kind of like a little bit shady. Like you'll find stuff, but you may not like the quality of what it is when you find it. It's just you're gonna find a whole bunch of stuff you may or may not want.
Like bootleg Godzilla.
That's not a mall to me, you know. Like that's what Steve said. It's a flea market, an indoor flea market.
They weren't kidding about
really
that.
A mall.
Even though we're living in the 2020s at this point, there is no state like Pennsylvania when it comes to being caught between the modern age and antiquity, because you can go to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, the home of Little League Baseball, and you can see how the Lycoming Mall has held on to its history and yet evolved, and drive south to Selinsgrove and see their mall. But a few miles away, you've got one of those Saturday, Sunday flea markets where you can still get comics from the 90s for 25 cents to $1. Those hologram Fatal Attraction issues for no more than $10.
Where I got my comics was flea markets back in the day. So I found
I'm
my
sure
first mall
there
in
are
Massachusetts.
still. I'm sure there are still some malls that are buzzing and they're the a full like center of energy and people going out there. Every mall I've been to in the last 10 years, whether it's Washington State, Oregon, California, New Jersey, feels like it's either ghost town. Half the stores are closed already. It's like to rent out, or even those that are still somewhat functioning. There are not that many people around. You don't bump into people like you used to when you walk around the mall. You have your freedom to walk. I can let my kids run, like elementary school kids. They can just run. I'm not concerned. Like in the 90s, early odds, and would have not been possible. It's too many people that would have gotten lost. But malls are kind of spooky sometimes if you're the only one in it.
It's so interesting to see how shopping has evolved in a physical environment. We're leaving online retailers out of it because when the Moreno Valley Mall opened in California, this was where my grandfather lived. It was huge, and whenever I would be driven 30 minutes north to Moreno Valley from Marietta, where I lived with my parents and my younger brother, my grandfather and I, we'd go to the mall and hang out at the food court or hang out with some of his buddies, do the mall walking thing. Or I didn't know at the time, he'd scope out the lady mall walkers. And it was a great time because you could go to Walden Books and check out the comics or go to KB Toys, to Suncoast. Was great. But then we moved to the East Coast and I got to see the death of malls. I worked at a mall for a little while. Was working two jobs, one for a Verizon third-party reseller, and my full-time job was working at a comic book store in the West Manchester Mall in York, Pennsylvania. Just got to slowly see that thing die from having three working fountains and filled with stores to the Victoria's Secret closing to the B. Dalton closing Value City until there were only 5 stores and eventually got turned down. And it's an outside mall, a shopping center, as they call it. But malls are coming back. So
Not in this town.
maybe not in your town, but
You don't have a
they
Target.
definitely
You
come
don't live
back.
in civilization.
We have a Walmart.
Wow, Josh.
The last mall I went to, they had like a store. I thought they would have some comics, but it seemed like they only had like Funkos. They're like about 1,000 Funkos, but it was a huge store. I don't know how many square feet, but like it was huge. Like if you just imagine like I don't know, your average comic book store times 10 in size. Half of that was full of Funkos. The other half was just empty. You had to walk through the store through an empty space to get to the shelves. And it just shows you that I mean rent can't be that much if you can as a store like that just rent a huge store and just fill half of it because yeah the mall was kind of dead and they're probably like just trying to get tenants in.
Because I
That's
remember
what
like back in the 90s, like I would go like, parents and stuff, we'd go to the mall like a Friday night. You'd go eat at the food court or whatever, and then like walk around for like an hour or two, meet back here at blah 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 time. And this kind of thing, it's like maybe you had cash, maybe you didn't. You'd go see just like, oh, is this a new product? Like what's new, what's coming out?
Just browse, really.
Yeah, it started with Toys R Us dying
Well,
or
that's
around the same time, like cause and effect, but
the
probably the other
problem with
way around. But
the
yeah, around that
problem
time.
the problem with Toys R Us was what's it called? Investment firms buying into it, like literally that whole model is just to like get rid of companies. I think the other problem with malls, like around here in Atlanta, a lot of them get shot up. So it's like a lot of people don't go to malls because it's like it's a good chance you'll get shot.
I've actually heard about that too. Because there's one where, like, yeah, if you go to this mall in like Atlanta, Georgia, be prepared not to want to go to after that. So it's
And like, because I
a
went
high
to
crime rate.
Lennox, and I went to Lennox once. It's a nice mall. Like, it's not a bad area. It's in Buckhead. Literally had lunch 2 hours later. That same spot got shot up at. And I'm like, glad we weren't there 2 hours later.
That's such a shame. We've had that happen 4 times in the last 3 weeks at one of the malls in West Austin, and uh, I think part of it is just the environment we live in, but also in Texas, you basically could go to a Burger King and get a free gun. It's so easy to get firearms here in Texas if you really want one.
But they have a good income.
Malls used to be a pretty safe place, but it seems like I don't know. It might have even been before, but ever since that incident in the movie theater with The Dark Knight,
I was
those
about to
sorts.
say, but you always got like guns easily. The thing is, like, I don't know, people just get the wrong ideas nowadays because nothing really matters anymore, apparently, um, in all levels of society, as we've seen. That's much.
But I'd rather go to a mall and feel not necessarily joyful, but just happy. Just browse, window shop, maybe buy a few things. The King of
Can you
Prussia
do
Mall in
that?
Philadelphia is great. You mentioned stores like comic stores being huge but halfway filled. Comic Masters in the King of Prussia Mall in Philadelphia is that to a T. But then you walk down to where they have some of the top of the line stores like Macy's with a Nespresso cafe and their own built-in Toys R Us, since Toys R Us is exclusive to Macy's for now. And there's a huge Barnes and Noble with one of the largest collected edition sections I've seen. So
So you still get that joy out of a mall with all the eeriness, or there's certain malls that don't have the eeriness, I guess.
So
it depends on the location.
so this
Pretty
guy
much.
this guy decided to ring in 2025 because the first activity I did was wake up way too early, drove 30 minutes up to a mall to go wait outside for 2.5 hours to be the first one in line at the Lego store. Was that
Woo!
was that really my plan to be the first one in line? No. But I just happened to get like one, it was traffic, two, Abby woke me up early. And I found it very bizarre. I was the first one in line. I'm like, how did I end up here in life?
Yeah, what was that for? Because you can order anything online.
Well, it was two things.
So you don't have to be the first one, right?
Well, it was two things.
He don't need
One,
to be first ever. So this is the first time he ever was.
I could answer. um, One, I've never done it before, so I was like, oh yeah, let's do it. Two, I took off 5 days that week. So I was like, okay, I want to work on this big Lego. Three, Lego, this is a whole nother can of worms. They do this thing called gift with purchase, where if you buy something and it's like they have it in stock, they'll give you like a free set. So I was like, okay, I want to make sure I get this gift with purchase. So that was the reason why I got up at the ass end of dawn.
You get that too but yeah, no, I'm not questioning. Like more power
No, but
to
I'm
you.
saying I wanted to
Buying
build it for those 5 days.
Gotcha,
If I
gotcha.
order online, I would have to wait for it to ship.
And thanks for the idea. Like I must be like completely like blank, like not thinking of it. But yeah, you can buy you can get the free gift, the bookshelf, and just switch out the character because it comes with a middle-aged woman. It's like like that set is kind of like I like the bookshelf, I don't like the set. It's like of course you can modify it and customize it. Like how stupid am I to not think of that? So, yeah, when I saw the pictures you posted, I was like, oh yeah, it makes so much sense. Like how did I not realize I can just switch out the minifigure myself?
I will tell you, Torsten, that depending upon what people are into, they will line up hours early, ask crack of dawn for
So
That's why I asked what it was for, because I lined up at like 4 a.m. at a Walmart to get the Super Nintendo special edition that after the NES came out and sold out super quick, I was afraid that the Super Nintendo re-release was also going to sell out. They produced more, and
right?
the classic, where the games are pre-installed. So I got up and like stood in line at 4 a.m. and got one back in, I don't know, it must have been at this point almost 10 years ago, eight,
Those
9 years
things
ago.
hold up too. I've got one connected to the TV in the bedroom.
See,
So on you.
For me, working retail, I usually don't go to midnight releases. I'd have to be the one overseeing the midnight releases and go like, oh, No, this
You
is going to be a long
set
night.
aside. Can you like if you can you do that? I mean, I can edit this out
No,
if you
no,
like
they get
cannot
kind of
talk
mad about
about it.
that because he has withholding products. That's why you can't do that.
You
They
can
will
say
I'd
like
be
probably
like
if it
one like,
falls on
please
the
don't sell
shelf,
out.
or
Please don't sell
throw,
out.
you throw one item on the shelf where no one else can see it, and you know where
No,
it is.
because my luck, there'd be somebody like management who would see like, why isn't that on the sales floor when it's being sold right now? And be like, I don't got a good answer for that. And then they just get mad. So like, okay, I have to pretty much just hope and pray that whatever comes out at midnight that I want to get isn't out by the time I clock out for work and can buy it.
I
So
would just swipe my card at the register and put it somewhere. I don't know. It's just
I wish I could have done that. But they're like, no, you can't even buy it beforehand because they have
just
regulations
3
about that
days.
too and
in
fines.
between
So
cards. You're not selling, right? You're not at the checkout, like because if you're at the checkout, you can. I've worked at the store. There are ways to swipe one, and it's
yeah,
like. But I guess now
have
maybe
the
nowadays different.
See,
unique
Best Buy was a
perspective of
little.
being the midnight release guy for Call of Duty. It's like, oh God, people take this seriously, I guess.
Best Buy was a little bit easier than Walmart because Walmart didn't do pre-orders for the longest time. But when I was working, I think during my still first tour of duty working for Best Buy, you could advance pre-order stuff either through the website or in store. And as an employee, you could still do that and get your employee discount. So you could have that item on hold for you to pick up at the midnight release and it wouldn't be a violation of the employee code of conduct. Whereas when I was working my second tour of duty at Walmart in 2014, I really wanted the deluxe edition of the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack and was working overnights at that time. I had to clock out for my lunch break during the Renault team's lunch break and hope that it was in stock. But it was York, Pennsylvania. By that point, people in that place of foul scum and villainy had vacated the premises.
Yep. I remember for me, it was Metal Gear Solid 5 coming out and me being like, oh, please still be there. And now, of course, you can just buy it for like $10 on PlayStation Network. So,
Now, the biggest thing, Torsen, in my area at least, and even when I was living in York, that people within our culture of the geeks still go out and purchase and line up for is these Funko Pops because Funko still has exclusivity agreements with Hot Topic and Box Lunch. So people will line up hoping, even though I feel like the bubble either already has popped or is close to. Oh, that's badass.
oh, I have that one. Nice.
Badass.
Thorsten, you have a problem.
It either has popped or it's about to pop on the value of these exclusives. It's more going to be like the one Torsen just showed, where they're a little bit older in terms of production line that are going to hold their value, but people will go in the hopes that it'll be valuable that day or that first week to resell it or to get a chase of an exclusive.
They tricked people with that one. It was like supposed to be an exclusive, and everyone that ordered online apparently got the Lifebringer version instead of the original Galactus.
Yeah. That one is the same one my sister got me as a birthday gift one year. So I'm like, I'm always keeping that one.
It's a cool freaking pop. We had wanted a Galactus for a long time. The reason why that one is more commonplace than the other version of the previous
The actual one
is because Funko's production team screwed up. That Lifebringer was supposed to be a 1 in 6 variant, but they reversed it. So it was actually the regular edition that is the 1 in 6 variant.
I did not know that. That's cool.
I'm also curious because I feel like they trashed a bunch of those because they were worried about like the marketing crashing on like the value of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like so 2020 is, interesting things happen, but it caused like a lot of people to get into hobbies. I do feel like we're starting to see like people, like some people are definitely getting out of said hobbies. Like I can imagine Funkos don't sell as much because it's like, especially as anyone knows who's a collector, you get to a point where it's like, I'm out of room. Because like with Funko, it's like, oh, this isn't that much. Doesn't take
You're
that much space.
reconsidering your life as you're leaving your depression or something. Like, I think that started already 2 or 3 years ago with the pandemic ending. Lots of people are like, and you saw, I think, like a retraction on like the omnibus sell. I think Omar talked about it, that Marvel was also a little bit concerned with people going back out, that books didn't sell as much anymore. They still sell more than they did prior to the pandemic, but it's not like 2021 anymore.
No.
And one of the biggest problems, and I'm not complaining, Brand, believe me, I am
He's complaining.
stoked by the fact that we have such a large variety of omnis and collected editions coming out. But compared to the pre-pandemic releases, it's basically like we have too much variety. So it scares off those who don't want to remain invested in the hobby. For those of us who are willing to stick around and we understand that you don't have to buy every single release, it's a beautiful thing. Please, Marvel, release that fucking Spider-Girl omnibus at some point.
See, for me, it's like I seen 10 years ago when it felt like there's barely any omnis or like hardcovers out being printed at all, whether like unless there's like you had a movie come out that's tied to it, like maybe like an Iron Man one or like one for Guardians of the Galaxy. Like maybe you get like one for like movie tie-in. Now we have like so many X-Men books coming out that you're like chronologically in order. Like that's kind of
Well,
insane. That's
well,
just the X-Men, let alone like Raw, Micronauts, and like Godzilla.
the omnis
Like
are
to
actually
me, like
more logical in terms of their release. You look at, you use Guardians of the Galaxy as an example. When Volume 2 came out, what did Marvel do? They said, "Oh, let's rush out the Dugan omnibus," and that thing is thin because it wasn't a long run. They could release an expanded edition with the Infinity Wars material in that, and it would be so much better. But now David and his team, and thanks to us and Omar, we've been able to be better about the way that these omnis are mapped and which omnis are released, because more often than not, people, if they have an investment and a say, they're going to invest their money in that product. The other side of things, since we were talking Funko, is that Funko has gone the opposite direction. They're still releasing a crap ton of things with newer licenses and old licenses, but the quality control isn't there. Marvel's had quality control issues, but they're fewer than what Funko is dealing with. The quality control is not there. The ethics with the business isn't there. I have the Funko app, and my overall value for my whole collection is $25,548. I'm looking to clear probably 90% of that, not just because of the quality and the fact that I want to invest in the new stuff, but because I don't really want to support a business that doesn't have the same ethics that align with mine. Marvel's made mistakes, especially this last year with misprints, but you have open communication and feedback that's received without there being condemnation. It's kind of like, to hook it back in with Kevin Smith. He went down a route where he pretty much did everything he felt he could do without caring what the fans thought, like with Red State and Tusk and Yoga Hosers. But then he actually listened to the fans and he started revitalizing his career. The fans don't need to have final say, bottom line, but you need to understand and respect your audience in order to be successful.
And to
And
bring it back to the movies, because they did the Clerks comics, like the Clerks cartoon, but they also did the Clerks comic series. Part of me always was just like, I'm always like, if you want to do more Mallrats, do it as a comic, like maybe start out there. But man, yeah. Did anyone get the in-action figures from the View Askewverse?
did not.
Was trying to behave myself. I do have some Kevin Smith Funko Pops though.
Oh man, because they stopped printing those. Like I got a couple of them. That's one line. Man, if they brought some of those back, I would definitely get them again because they were fun little skull. Like they were all based off of the Clerks cartoon, but for the various movies. and it's like they were called inaction figures because they had no moving parts.
Yeah,
this remind me
very
about
little
thing
movement.
too. So, Torsten, you brought up about like the scene Magic Eye thing earlier. Did you want to elaborate more on that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we can take the. I have multiple. They're just by. I know we like drifted away from the movie, but
Because
just
right
by
now
talking
I'm
about
seeing
that,
you
there's.
like in the green backgrounds right
We can
now.
talk
But I
about
swear
Magic Eye.
earlier
We
like
can
you were
talk
about
about
the disco ball.
Stan Lee, which like I think his scene was one of the highlights of the movie. His part of it, because it wasn't just a cameo; he had an actual role in this that drove the plot forward, and then had a comedic end in the end too, because he was paid off to do so. Um, and There's multiple angles there, especially also with regards to Kevin Smith and his comic book store. That's also New Jersey, and I didn't know that. So next time I'm in New Jersey, hopefully in the summer, I might take the time. I looked it up. It's still 1.5 hours drive each way, but I might just go there and have a look. But I saw they have the Jesus statue from Dogma, which is awesome. I might just go there for that.
Sir, that's called the Buddy Christ. Show a little respect to our Lord and Savior.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Praise
But yeah,
be,
no,
Buddy
the
Christ.
Magic Eye, everyone with the sailboat. First of all, you guys wanted to convince me on Discord that they are all setting this guy up because he was the only one not seeing it. To me, it was all again part of this. What movie did I just watch? None of this makes sense. I might just go back later, well, not today, but maybe another day this week and watch the actual theatrical release to see what you guys are all talking about. But with regards to the Magic Eye and the sailboat, and everyone is like, "Oh yeah, that's a sailboat." Like that's not how Magic Eye works. Like that's not how those pictures work. You have to at least like give it a couple of seconds. You have to look through and not stare at it. You have to look through them. Anyone that wasn't around in the 90s that's watching this, like you have to look through the picture, align your eyes that two eyes like overlap. The vision overlaps. And then that picture gets created. It's like basically you, instead of looking at your computer screen right now, look at the wall behind it. And that's basically when your computer screen gets blurry. Hey, you see your computer screen twice. You would see our faces twice if you look like at the wall behind the screen. So that's how those pictures work. Look at the wall behind the screen, but through the screen. And those pictures then get created, the 3D effect. In that picture wasn't a sailboat. There was like a bunch of different shapes, squares, circles, half open, half. I don't even know how to describe that. Like
wait a minute, you paused it to do the Magic Eye?
Yes, I did pause it, did the Magic Eye, took a screenshot and shared it. If you haven't seen it on Discord, you can open it and try to look through your screen. And at some point, if you look at the right distance, it should overlap and you get that vision. It takes you about 2 or 3 seconds. I mean, if you know how it works, for the first time, it might take you longer. But if you know how those pictures work, it shouldn't take you more than 2 or 3 seconds. But it will also not take you half a second. You need a few seconds to get there. So it's not like those people in the movie just glancing at it. It's like, oh yeah, it's a sailboat and keep walking. That doesn't work like that. You have to stand in front of it and focus. Like you have to actually do something.
Also, it's never said, but I knew guys like him. I think it was implied too. Like he huffed some. Like I think he was a huffer or something. Like he wasn't in his right mind.
Like Willem was the character's name. Like he was like, I'm going to have like a lunch. I got a Coke here. I'm going to stand all day from open to close trying to see this damn sailboat. And like when you see the sailboat and other people walk in, like, oh yeah, it's a sailboat, and it just drives him nuts. Like that's the comedy there.
All of these characters have their own mental issues. TS has commitment issues because he'd rather fight the father than fight for his relationship. Brody's got some sort of undiagnosed ADHD or megalomania going on there, and Willem's definitely a huffer. He has this glazed over look.
I mean, I can see how, like what Josh just said, like sometimes if you're not doing it right, you will never see any picture in those images. If you actually look at the image instead of through it, you will never see the 3D effect. So yeah, he seems like a character who would never try anything else but look at the picture itself.
It was two things, because he's there for comedy, But he's also like, okay, Renee told he was the one who got Jane and Silent Bob to save Brody and TS. And without him, we wouldn't have gotten that lovely sex video at the sex tape at the end.
Yeah.
The amount of moving parts to get that to even work is kind of insane. The Rube Goldberg-esque shenanigans.
Exactly. Very Looney Tunes with that act as well.
It has to be available for lots of production days to get all the different people in to match with it.
What's very funny is like can't remember this show up in the extended cut. The entire movie, like Silent Bob's trying to get like the Jedi mind trick to work, and the last time he does it, he's like, "Oh, he finally gets it to work," and he's like, "How'd you get to work? Like you're like a Jedi, man, like Yoda." It's like, and he does like his one line in the movie that Silent Bob does. That's usually very profound, and it's the quote from Empire Strikes Back from Yoda.
Also,
that was a nice touch.
Which is a very cool callback, or I guess because this is a prequel to Clerks, a flash forward to yet another Star Wars discussion in a Kevin Smith film.
Also, because the other crazy thing is that was back when like Star Wars was pretty much like, I think like the books were still coming out, but it wasn't an active franchise. Also,
as far as live action goes, it was dormant until '99. So
it was in the respect that they were doing a re-release of the original trilogy. It was prior to the 1997 special editions. It was a special release on VHS and limited theatrical of the original versions, minus A New Hope, which had added A New Hope to the Star Wars title crawl.
But that goes back to what we talked about comics. Like none of this was mainstream. Neither Star Wars, Star Wars stopped being mainstream, and then we went into the dark ages. And then same for comics. Like they're talking about Wolverine with today's perspectives. Like, oh yeah, everyone knows. Like in '95, I doubt the mainstream audience knew who Wolverine was. Like there wasn't a movie about it. The animated show wasn't even there was just like specific niche knowledge, nerd knowledge that went into this that was not mainstream. Nowadays, it's mainstream. Star Wars is mainstream. Marvel is mainstream. Like it wasn't back then.
Well,
Batman was, but like that was like this came out the same year Batman Forever did, and this references a lot of the Keaton movies in it too, especially with like where you get these wonderful toys from. Sorry.
I was trying to say that, so thank you for that. Also, when he's running by LaForge and all of them, he makes, I forget, it's like an X-Wing, like Silent Bob, they add that sound effect in from Star Wars when he's running by LaForge and all of them.
Getting back to Willem, there was actually one of those magic eye setups in malls back in the 90s. Instead of showcasing replicas of classic artwork like the Scream or Picasso, they would have framed pictures of the magic eye boards set up in malls, usually by a C's candy stand if you lived in California.
Well, and I believe they even have more pictures in the background. That's why it's like, but then because it's in the background, you see the picture they show with the gray, white, and black dots and stuff. But in the background, you see an image that has like red and dark waves and stuff. I think that's also Magic Eye pictures. Like maybe that was a sailboat and they mistook and no one actually checked to switch it out.
When he kicks the signboard over and gets his frustration, that's probably my favorite payoff to it in the movies when he just like, kicks the sign over.
Well, and also talking about signs of the time, I can't imagine like because he brought like his own lunch there. And it's like, yeah, that was a little bit more common where it's like, yeah, you could bring some food, hang out. You know, nowadays it's like, no, we gotta shoot this out. So it's interesting how there's like little things you forget about too. Like, see, I remember
it's like
when
a
Magic
mess
Eyes came out.
like grease on his shirt.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. The mustard stain.
Yeah. At least I hope that's mustard.
And Torsten, you wanted to discuss a little bit more with Stan Lee, but even though I referenced it earlier, I love the fact that the Stan Lee we're getting, yes, he has somewhat the personality of the Stan Lee we saw in the 90s, who had returned to really marketing himself and being a presence for Marvel Comics, even being heavily involved in the animated projects over the live action projects back then. But Brody is, in his conversation with Stan, reflecting the way the bullpen was in the 70s, talking about superhero genitalia. And I know this because Jim Steranko talked about his experiences with uh, Stan Lee and Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum, since they all worked closely together in New York, and how those would be actual conversations they would have about the characters when developing these stories, and just how far they could take it in the initial scripting process before they have to draw it back in order to meet the needs of the Comic Code Authority. So it's
what's
hilarious.
What's funny about that is like the can't re-stretch like that part of his body thing was also a joke panel later in the Fantastic Four book, where like Sue's like, "Did I ever tell you I'm really glad you got hit by cosmic rays?" And because like when they're in bed, like it's funny how a joke in Mallrats basically got canonized into Marvel.
Yeah, multiple times too. If you read the current run by Ryan North, you see a lot of the flexibility that we haven't normally seen from Mr. Fantastic. And even during the, as we've discussed recently, the controversial Civil War event, when Sue decides to leave Reed for a little while, she sexes him up, and you see him in his post-coital shape where he's all stretched out too. So Mallrats could have been the inspiration for stuff like that.
He's a superhero secret.
Also, I'm gonna have to call Steven out on this because he's bringing up some Marvel propaganda for no reason. Marvel never had a bullpen like that. EC Comics had a bullpen like that, and Stan Lee wanted that, so he talked about it. But they never had a bullpen like that.
Well, I don't know what else to call it. I use the term bullpen to relate to the way that they had the newspaper collaboration. I don't know what Marvel officially called it, but
I think
Stan Lee has referenced it.
The problem is they call it a bullpen, but the problem was they all work from home. They all work remote.
Going back to Stan Lee in this movie, I think Stan Lee's role was the most thought out role amongst all of them. From the introduction, making it like all mystery. Who's in this comic book store? Like Brody, even like who is this? Why do I have to wait here? Why can I not go into my store to buy comics? The setup, and then to the reveal who's in there. He's trying to get in, gets kicked out, up to like their conversation about like just how the genitalia works, but leading into like a life lesson that Stan Lee teaches him. And then up to his exit with the comedic payoff that he's actually just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I tell him whatever you needed me to tell him for him to get back on the right track. I don't believe any of this, but like, cool, I helped you prank your friend or bring your friend back on the right track. And the whole arc that Stan Lee has, to me, was the most thought out character in this.
What I liked about that too is if you ever seen Captain Marvel that came out like 2019, I guess like a year after he passed away, he's actually reading the script for Mallrats while he's on the bus. So like, and it goes like, "Trust me, true believer," like just keeps repeating that. So like, I like how they call back to Mallrats because Captain Marvel takes place in the 90s. So
also, I'm still shocked.
Obviously, Stan Lee would be practicing for that movie.
I'm shocked he was 70 because I'm like, I knew he wasn't young, but I was like, he's got to be like 60. Like, I don't know why. I was like, let me do the math. It's like, no.
He looked way younger, but I think you pointed out the hands give it away.
Yeah. He was not in poor health in his 70s. That came much later. He was apparently very eager to be involved in this, not just because he loved being involved in multimedia back then, but because he would do what he could for his fans, and knowing Smith was a fan, he wanted to participate. But that story he developed, which was partially Smith and partially Lee, was hilarious considering how devoted he was to his wife Joni for so long, who actually wound up in one of his multimedia properties, and she was Madam Web in the 1990 Spider-Man the Animated Series along.
Why would you do that to your wife?
Well, that's the thing is like Stan Lee
Oh.
even comments saying like, "Oh, she's a lovely looking woman." And it's like the joke
Yep.
is, of course, that like, but like that's why it's kind of like, oh yeah, me and Mick Jagger have like a running bet going on. Who has got the most women? And it's like,
Also, I guess I did not know this until recently. Adam West was a huge freak. Like he would have multiple women during scenes. Like it's just crazy where it's like Adam West.
The orgies that you would think would have taken place on the production lots during the 60s and 70s for British productions. No, that was stuff that took place on the Warner back lots and in the trailers for Adam West and Burt Ward, apparently.
In costume.
In costume.
But some of the characters here, I didn't know if it was just their bad comedic timing, if it was a joke or if it was just bad writing. I think there's one scene, I think it was Brandy complaining about TS proposing, and she's like saying he had the audacity to propose to me without discussing it with me first. It's like, was it supposed to be a joke or are you that stupid?
Wow, that's not
a theatrical cut at all. I don't think she knows she's going to propose until like the game show.
Because that's one of the big things is like he didn't want to tell what, because he looks like an asshole, but he's like, no, we need to go to Florida because I want to propose. Like she doesn't know.
That happens right in the beginning of the movie. He explains the whole thing that he was going to take her to Florida to propose. Like that's clear from the beginning of the movie. And then throughout the movie, there's comments about it from him. He tells the father, I believe, and then he gets upset and mad. And then definitely Brandy knows. And then she says, like, he had the audacity to propose without telling me or without discussing it with me first. So it's like, what are your expectations? Is that maybe Kevin Smith writing and like him not knowing how proposals work? Or is that the character having bad comedic or like presentation in the punchline or in the joke? But if that's not even meant to be in the movie, then it's a whole different story.
I think it's just another bad example of how the theatrical cut, despite being imperfect, because I fully believe some of the aspects of the extended cut would better explain parts of the theatrical. The extended is inferior to the theatrical cut.
I don't know if you need those explanations because because one of the running jokes in the theatrical is everyone knows about the proposal. Because it's like it's a small town.
All talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brandy doesn't know, but everyone else does. Because like
Gwen knows and Renee knows and James and Bob know.
I feel it's reversed because Brandy knows, but no one else knows. Like Brandy actually explains that to Gwen, I believe, like that he was about to propose. So she learns it from Brandy. Like completely reversed in that case.
I like it more in the theatrical because she's just so clueless as to why TS was infuriated that she chose her asshole father over this trip to Florida that was so important.
Yeah, I gotta go back and watch that.
TS telling that to Brandy at the end is like a wham, like, oh wow, you're kind of serious about this kind of a thing. Whereas in beginning, it just feels like it kind of like just comes out of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
Well, Brandy's like, it's weird because if you describe the plot, you would think she's a main character, but she's really a minor character.
She's pretty much there from like beginning, her talk with Gwen, and then the end.
Yeah.
She's just the plot to help TS on his quest, basically. Whereas Renee, you could make the argument that to a certain extent, she is the same for Brody, but I feel she's a more fully fleshed out character because there's more interaction between her and Brody and TS and all the other characters. She drives her own plot forward.
Well, like I said, because I remember, especially like the first time I saw, like, wacky dick jokes, blah, 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 blah. Watching it later in life, it's like, okay, like, especially like early 20s, I'm like, no, I remember these feelings of being like, what am I doing with my life? Like, because each character kind of has that. sentiment where it's like some of them, because the thing is too, I love Jay and Silent Bob. They do work better when they're 20 something and they've evolved the character, but it's like, do we need like them at 60? You know, at certain points, it's like, I don't know if I want to keep seeing these characters age.
Well, I keep thinking like I imagine somebody watching it now, going back to watching like their beginnings of like Clerks and Mallrats, going like, I don't see the charm is anymore. These characters, I'm like, I don't know how to explain it, like why it works. Suddenly, it just does for me
I,
anyway.
I think when there's an evolution of these characters, I mean, if Smith wants to have characters return in future works, I'm all for it. And he's done that several times, both for himself and because fans feel attracted and connected to these characters. They need to be able to grow just like we grow and learn and evolve, unlike how Spider-Man is in the Marvel comics. But
I just had one more day with her.
but you look at Jason Lee's characters, you see Brody, and this was Jason Lee's debut role. He was a professional skateboarder before he got this role. And
Speaking of 90s,
yeah, he may be obnoxious. I think that's part of the point, that he needs to have something kick him right in the balls to get him to mature in life. Obviously not in personality, but he becomes this host and eventually he goes and opens up this comic store when his popularity dies down and he loses the role with the Tonight Show. But he's still with Renee even when he opens that comic store. When you look at his character, I think the last name is Edwards. I'm positive the first name is Banky for his character in Chasing Amy.
yeah.
You see him from his perspective, and maybe we'll review Chasing Amy one day, but be this independent, low tier comic book artist, this tracer, evolve his style, be shrewd enough in business to negotiate for financing for the Blunt Man and Chronic movie, and even evolve socially where he's very homophobic to the point where he has to face that and ends up married to the target of his homophobia at the end of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. That's the kind of evolution I enjoyed in these Askewverse films, but you can take it down the wrong path too, because you see the main characters in Clerks evolve from 1 to 2, even though they take a bit of a step backwards as well. And it goes in a completely dark direction for Clerks 3 for a couple of.
I mean, you could argue already went in a dark direction with Clerks 1 if they decided to go with that alternate ending.
Well, yeah,
glad they did it.
That's true.
That would just
I'm glad
flatline the entire series.
I'm glad that Smith listened to Mosier and his mother and his friends, and they went with the theatrical ending for that one.
So I feel like, one, I feel bad for Torsten because it's like, it does sound like you watch, like I've never seen the extended. It sounds like you watched like the wrong movie.
Mm-hmm.
2, we probably, in hindsight, maybe should have warned because I forgot we did Dogma. But yeah, it's like, you can't compare. It's like Chasing Amy, Jay and Silent Bob, like they're all really different films.
I've never watched Chasing Amy. Again, Clerks is different than Dogma, but they're both great. Again, this case, I guess I can't judge the movie then. I definitely did not like the extended version. I'll go back and watch the theatrical release, see if I like it. But I thought Dogma is a masterpiece. Dogma is one of my all-time favorite movies. Clerks is great, isn't bad. Like it's good, it's great. Not part of my top 10, but like I see the direction. I see it's also his first movie, like getting your feet wet, and for that to be your first movie, like ever, that like tip my head. Like that's some other people don't achieve that in their lifetime. So with regards to that, Clerks was a great movie. Not his best, but definitely not his worst based on what I've seen. Again, I haven't watched Chasing Amy. I think Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, I think I've seen parts of it, but I've heard from everyone that the level kind of gets dumped down there. It's like a Dumb and Dumber's kind of movie. I don't know. I might have to actually sit down and watch that one again or in its totality. But
I will say this.
I feel like it's one of those movies, you know what to expect and you get what you expect. And I don't know if I need that.
Well, the other thing with Jay and Silent Bob, it was supposed to be a send off to those characters. So if you watch all the other movies, you're kind of like, I remember these characters. And yet it's also that one is like just straight up Muppets, where it's like, especially like the Muppets road movies, because it's like, okay, we're gonna do a road trip, we're gonna meet random celebrities. So I will say this. We're probably going to end up doing Chasing Amy at some point. Then if we do like Clerks, if we were doing all of them at some point, it's like, all right, we might as well do Jay and Silent Bob, like, because
You
it's
do
like,
say Amy, you got to do the new one too, the documentary.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that one.
I told you about it. You forgot.
Yes, I did.
Torsen
James just came back to say that.
Yes, he did.
Dogma
Josh,
in terms of overall quality is my favorite Kevin Smith film. For connection, Clerks 2 is due to the fact that there's a character in that film that I was very much like, raised in a conservative household and having to break out and be my person. Those who have seen Clerks 2 can probably figure out which character. I'm not.
Steve, we know you want to talk about the Pants Goblin, okay? We get it.
but if we look at overall quality and emotion, I feel that Dogma is at the top, and then Chasing Amy is only secondary due to a very striking flaw that, based on the time period it was filmed, it's not a flaw. But if you were to look at it through a modern lens,
The end?
it's
The end?
it's blatant. Yeah, the ending.
Yeah.
And
I think.
go ahead, Josh, and then I'll say my point.
The
But
other thing,
I like that because of the fact that that is how Smith's relationship with that person, he saw it ending that way before it actually ended, just under different circumstances.
also, Mallrats is kind of a wonderful stumble, I would say, because it's like there are certain things you never see again. Like Jay and Silent Bob aren't this cartoony. It's not like there's no over the top wackiness. I would even say there's not as many storylines that like connect at the end, because like all the other ones, maybe two or three, and they're a lot more grounded. Because like, well, and the other weird thing with Mallrats, you see some characters like Jason Lee who handles Kevin Smith's dialogue and enhances it. And I would say like Brandy, TS, even like Renee, like Renee's a little better, but those three had a hard time. Like they didn't have the same quippiness that Kevin Smith dialogue requires.
Yeah.
So
Agreed. Especially Shannon Doherty and Jeremy London, you can see them struggling because Shannon, coming from Beverly Hills 90210, which was very soap opera, no offense to fans of 90210, and dramatic, to have to switch over to pretty much ad-libbing lines and making them your own. Two different territories.
What year did that come out over here?
Mallrats? So that was 90.
No, 90210.
I think that started in like 91 or 92.
whoa, who the hell are you? You're asking us?
Or
What happened to
1990.
Oracle?
I didn't watch that much of this show.
You have all the. You're connected to the internet. You're supposed to have the.
I got it out here.
Yeah, but that show 90210, the original, is pure 90s mellow drama.
91
Dawson's
through
Creek.
2000. But yeah, it launched in 91. Oh no, first release 1990. October
No, this is
1990.
after CUF.
Yeah, because she left
I
on bad
know.
terms.
Yeah.
She did the same thing with Song.
90 to 10. Okay. There are multiple of those. Beverly Hills 90.
Yeah, there are three
210.
versions of 90210.
I did kind of like the
Okay.
last one. I did watch that.
I was not into soap operas, so
There's nothing better than Torsten being like, there's multiple of these. James, The last one's the superior one. Just that exchange.
Just wait till we get to the
I
grass
watched
scene.
all that one.
Hey, 20
You
years
watched-
later, I am still waiting on a revival of the OC. I'm not ashamed to say it.
Thorson, kick him out. Kick him out now.
We all get it once we're here.
There's a
Merry
movie.
Christmas, Josh.
Oh,
That's a TV show. Don't look it up. Thorson, just do yourself a favor. Don't look it up.
no,
If it
I
weren't
was
for the-
about.
If it weren't for the OC, we wouldn't have Gotham.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think we need the
We
OC.
suffered.
Never mind, you can just get rid of it.
Gotham was great.
It was bad. It was bad.
The TV show?
Bad show. Gotham, yes, it was bad.
The first two
Very bad.
seasons were well worth watching. I don't understand the need for the quick age up in the final season of some.
Put it to you like
Oh
this.
yeah, I know the
my
ending. The
parents-
last episodes, no, but
I'll
it
put it
got
to you
really
like
good
this.
after the second season, and it was peak television.
I don't know about that. Because here's the thing, my parents are watching a lot of stuff. They never finished watching Gotham. And I have to kind of agree with them on that one.
Wow, we found the one.
But
I'm shocked, actually. Wow.
I met
One thing about it, like-
some of the actors, took a picture, had them sign it. Like that's one of my favorite pieces.
So cool.
here's the thing,
Yeah,
I would rather
poster.
have
Nice
Kevin
guy,
Smith
too.
play Batman than I would whoever that kid was play Batman.
I believe he was fat ass or badass.
Batman.
No, he said he called him badass at one point because when he pulls
Fly,
out the
fat ass,
grappling
Oh,
fly.
you mean Mallrats. Fly, fat ass, fly.
See, that's the thing. We can say all the how we want about how like Chasing Amy and like Dogma and Clerks are more poignant. I can quote this movie all day. It's probably why it might be like close to my favorite. Like it's just popcorn fun. I could just like have a blast with this. However, I will be having no chocolate colored pretzels when I'm watching this movie. I don't want to ruin it for myself.
So you're saying that no one here has stink palmed someone.
I don't trust at least Josh not to do it, but at least I hope not.
I'm gonna do it. I
Almost
wanna do
forgot
that.
about that scene. That's also in that other version. So yeah, I actually
Just,
They did
I don't want to talk about that.
Just
They did
seeing
it in the
Michael
American Pie
Rooker's
too.
character slowly after that interaction get sicker and sicker. That to me is a karmatic payoff. He was
Making
such
sweet, sweet love to those pretzels too. Ugh.
a
Oof.
And we got the Animal House reference with the whole "what the fuck is going on."
Mm.
Also, I'm kind of curious now because I feel like if Torsten watched, and I'm making a generalization about you, my friend. I feel like if you watched the theatrical, you would have enjoyed it more, but I don't know if you would have liked this film. Like, I'm guessing like right now it might be like a D or an F. At best case scenario, I think it might be like a C minus, where you're like, yeah, okay.
Does the actual release introduce a proper plot and a story and a red line, or is it really just a random assembly of half-assed jokes that the extended version seems to be? Because
there's a
It's not
through
really a
line
theme.
for the
Okay.
theatrical. There is a true through line for it. Whereas
Even the
And
opening
it's a
joke
bunch
has a
of
through line
vignettes.
till later.
I feel like
yeah,
some of the stuff feels a little bit more organic, and it's kind of thing too where it's like you get rid of the you cut off a lot of the fat, so it's like the random jokes don't feel as bad because you're not like, okay, I've been sitting here for 40 minutes, what's going on? It's like, okay, we're 20 minutes in and we're at the like here are the random jokes.
The timing's a lot better for the jokes too, because there's some in the extended kind of like I don't get what the punchline for this joke was. Whereas like, it's more punchier in the theatrical cut if I had to put it live.
even if
Like-
you kept the governor stuff in, it could have worked if the comedic timing were better. Heck, you even recast the governor. Like, say you switch out with Super Troopers and you have Linda Carter as the governor and have a different reaction. I think it would have had a better.
but you
flow.
don't. Yeah, you really don't need it because she never comes back. The governor never plays a role anymore after the first 13 minutes. That scene is completely like mood and like it doesn't. It's not needed. And actually, yeah, those two things. There are two things actually that threw me off the most. One is the first scene, like getting into the movie. I actually checked if that's the right movie I'm watching because I was like, this doesn't feel like, again, after Clerks, like this is supposed to be in a mall. Like they're not in a mall. There's a whole different function. None of the characters that are on the cover are actually in the scene because even though TS and Brandy are kind of integrated later on in that scene on the rooftop. But the whole scene is about the governor and the bodyguards at the bottom in the courtyard. None of those characters show up anymore. The only character in that scene is the dad that shows up, but he wasn't even part of the entire scene either. So that was completely like, am I actually watching the right movie? And then the second part that's also apparently not in the theatrical release is the constant cuts, like the bad editing, where I was like, this is just amateur style. Like I can edit better than this with the same scene, and suddenly you have a cut and jump, and the characters sit in a different spot. And it's like clearly like two different recordings, two different takes.
Because I was about to say there's the one with the elevator. Like there's some noticeable mistakes, and some of it like because rewatching the DVD, you can tell it's ripped from like the VHS because there's like some quality.
Yeah,
like,
there's great differences for sure.
Yeah, or it's like this is a separate take just because like the light, like the coloring slightly off. But that just reminds me of watching like VHSs. So
I might just pay the $3.99 and rent the movie on VOD.
Dude,
so
just use my link.
Yeah,
so that's a different version than what James posted.
Yeah, I have the good version. James, I love you, but we have to have a conversation. You asking us about the internet, you failing on links. This is too much, man. What is going on? Is this?
It went away with the beard. It wasn't. The knowledge wasn't.
He'll be back.
Coward.
To be fair, though, considering I own, let's see, 4 or 5 different home media releases for this, none of them are here with me in Texas. I had to do the Fandango at home $4 rent because just like with Dogma, this SOB's not available for free streaming. Hopefully that changes because at the end of the day, Universal is the company that has the distribution rights for it here in the US. I heard overseas it's still available on Netflix, but it's not on Peacock or Paramount or any of the streaming services. If you have a subscription, you have to rent this for $4.90 or for $3.99.
And this is even nice about having a physical media copy of it. Get a whole snapshot of the 90s with it too.
The other weird thing with
that's cool.
Older, like I think like people kind of learn, it's like, yeah, because same thing with the Evil Dead series. Like, okay, this studio owns 1, this studio owns 2, another studio owns Army of Darkness, another studio like, so it's the kind of thing. It's like, yeah, they're part of the same continuity, but they're scattered through the winds. And the other thing is,
tone is off for like all 3 of them too.
Mm-hmm.
Also with Mallrats, that's a weird one because it's like I enjoy it, but it's like I can't. Part of me is like, yeah, how many people are like clamoring to watch Mallrats every month or every year?
I think
every month, but like
it's like, no, I thought about it. Okay, I'll give you that one.
I think
every month, okay, maybe not.
Time I had watched this, and I think that was because I bought the Blu-ray from Arrow Video that they had released with the new cut and the complete frame by frame remaster. Now I do recommend, because Smith did do commentary for both the theatrical and the extended, which for some reason isn't on every single home media release that has both cuts. The commentary for both is pretty entertaining.
Because I swear, like, LaForge is based off of like a character from like a TV show or something. Like, there's a lot of
there's a lot of Easter eggs.
Yeah,
I think his team security guards is a whole ad lib too, from what I remember looking it up. Like, I think it was just supposed to be like, I think it was just supposed to be that one security guard. He wasn't supposed to have like a whole team with him either.
I think that's where like all the PAs or something.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a box set of the US universe, but then that would require for the licenses to be all in one place. I believe with Dogma, we're getting into the right direction. It has already happened. So waiting for that release.
I'm sincerely hoping, Torsen, that if we get a box set, it's through Shout Factory, because they're a company that works with all the other companies to collaborate on these sets. Friday the 13th rights, for example, are a crap show, but they've been able to release that as a complete set. They could
I think
probably
that
do the same for
might be
the
output now.
universe.
About to get hard boiled through Shout Factory soon.
You got a link for that? I also got that ripped from my DVD collection.
I mean,
Wait a
that'll be
minute.
the one I have to upgrade for, but
Honestly,
minute.
though, if I had to have one distributor for the new release of Dogma, since Chasing Amy is part of the Criterion Collection, I would love to see the Criterion Collection incorporate Dogma as well. I've met Walt Flanagan, and he's a pretty chill dude. I've met Kevin Smith, and he he was a little odd the first time I met him because he was trying to figure out whether or not weed was actually for him. But the second time I met him, he was pretty cool, and was laughing about the fact that to this day, he and Bruce Willis can't be in the same room together.
I do think he gets asked about the most with Mallrats. Of all the movies, it gets brought up to him. I think Mallrats is the one who gets brought up the most to him.
Because, like I said, it's also like it's a certain kind of film that it's like I just don't see nowadays. Because yeah, it's like when Torsten's like, is it a strong plot or a random kind of assortment of scenes? It's like it's more of a, like in some ways it's more of a random assortment of scenes, but it's like that's kind of what makes it fun, just seeing these characters interact. And like I said, that soundtrack, I still love it to this day because we don't get soundtracks anymore either.
Mm-mm. Not like that.
No.
Not like that. I think you and Brand said it perfectly earlier that it's a lot like Animal House, and it's a lot like Revenge of the Nerds. This is a movie just put together for fun and to pay tribute to different aspects of things that Kevin Smith enjoys.
Because after
And I can see why after Clerks would be a tough act to follow. Like this movie would be a tough act to follow Clerks. But I do think it stands on its own. I don't think it's entirely like worthless as what its initial critical reception would make you believe. And honestly, I think for me, it's a little bit more on the underrated side. Although I'm glad nowadays it's seen more as a cult classic.
Honestly,
In general sense, if you're watching it together, anyway.
Honestly, out of all the Askewiverse films, and it pains me to say this because I love Clerks, Clerks 3 is bottom tier.
you've said that like 5 times.
I enjoyed that one.
Mallrats is not bottom tier for me. If I do a marathon, Mallrats is always included. It's always second because I follow through with how I originally watched the films, even though this is a prequel. But it's always in the rotation for these movies. I think overall, Kevin Smith's worst movie though is probably Yoga Hosers, considering it's just not a good movie. It's disrespectful to Germans. It's disrespectful to the acting abilities of Harley Quinn Smith and Lily Rose Depp, and even Johnny Depp to a certain extent.
I think the one that he did before that is worse.
What's that?
The one he did before that is worse.
Oh, Tusk. Well, Tusk is getting a sequel after Dogma 2, apparently.
Maybe.
So, kids, if you're out there watching, you haven't watched Mallrats before, this is a family film for the Easter time. You're like, man, I want something that's not really religious, but I want to celebrate Easter. Mallrats.
I want to see the Easter Bunny getting beat up in front of a bunch
Up
of
there with planes, trains, and automobiles for Thanksgiving and Die Hard for Christmas.
All I said was the Easter Bunny at the Linzo Mark was better, and he went off. He's fucking dead.
See, that is Lolly walked in when I was rewatching this, so that's the only scene she's seen, and her reaction was, "What the fuck is going on?" And I said, "Well, the Easter Bunny had it coming. You should sit down and watch the movie." So she's going to watch it with me this week.
There is, like I said, there is something. It's a product of its time too, because like I can't imagine like Gen Z. God, we need some young blood in here because it's like You're old.
My thing with here's my thing with the saying product of
You're
this time.
30 now.
I know he's old.
It's a product of this time because it's written by the people who were living in that time when it was written or made. So of course it's going to be a product of this time.
I will say this. I end up saying like it's a product of its time, not like in a negative way, because there's just certain things where it's like I don't think you can recreate that. But my point being, it's like I'm almost curious, Bar would hate this movie, but would be curious to see Bar's reaction because it's like, she's also foreigner. My point being, someone younger, it's like, hey, did you ever hang out at the mall like this?
See how more age was.
I know she does. That's why all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a minute, it might be a completely different culture.
They may not have oceans, but they got malls.
Hey, I'm not. Who asked if they got rain there?
They have oceans. What do you mean they don't have oceans?
Yeah,
We're all technically surrounded by the oceans.
James
now,
was shocked
anyway,
that it rained in Israel. That's all I'm saying.
Can I ask?
Never mind.
Snow.
Move on.
Can I ask though? There's one thing viewing after viewing that is weird to me, and maybe it's because I'm not a woman that I don't get it. Why would you walk into a clothing store and just randomly try on panties off the rack? That just seems like a bad idea hygienically.
They do explain it's because she tried going to the fitting room twice and got interrupted by Silent Bob. She's like, you know what? Next time he comes in, I'm just going to be like, not even care anymore.
I think no, Steve means also even in the changing room. Why would you try underwear
why would you
on?
try on panties? A bra I kind of get, but you're kind of exposing yourself hygienically with panties.
And they probably have a pad. I don't know. I'm not a woman.
For me, the funniest part of that scene was the clerk was tearing up at like Brody going like,
I know
was
exactly
Brody
what you're talking about.
describing spooning.
Have you ever
I do like in that scene, however, just the character to character conversations. When you watch these movies and follow these characters, there are hints based off of Gwen referring to her relationship with TS and her conversation with other characters, the path that she goes down for chasing Amy. And I really like that there is set up from film to film with the progression of these characters.
I forgot to bring this up because when I was watching it. This is the closest I've cut it to movie club where I'm like, oof, I got in it within an hour. One, it's rare to see like two characters get dumped at the beginning of a film because usually like they're trying to hook up with someone or blah blah blah. Two, Gwen's relationship, how she regrets like it's interesting because it's like she can't admit like the cheating was wrong, but you can kind of tell just the way she talks, especially because I feel like Brandy kind of ignores it. It's like she wishes she was she wishes she didn't do that, but she'll never admit it.
The reasoning behind it, though, as we learn throughout this film and then in Chasing Amy, it makes that conversation hit even harder.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know Gwen's character continued in Chasing Amy, so I feel like I have to go watch that because I felt Gwen was one of the stronger characters. In general, the side characters like Stanley, Gwen, they were all the strong characters in this, and the main characters were like, a little bit incoherent. But Gwen's character actually was also very not that I could identify but you could understand the character, where she came from, who she was, and her sorrow shown through like what she said, and I don't know. It's very very believable character, whereas others weren't.
Now, if you watch Chasing Amy, the thing you need to be there are a couple things, but without getting to the spoilers, there are a few things you need to be aware of. Smith, as you've seen, is fond of like Martin Scorsese and Coppola and other directors taking actors and moving them forward, whether in the same role or in completely different roles. So you carry on with Jason Lee and with Ben Affleck from this film, but in completely different roles. Yeah. Gwen is in the exact same role as are, of course, Jay and Silent Bob. But when you reflect upon Ben Affleck and Jason Lee in Chasing Amy, you have to understand that they're not the same characters featured in Mallrats.
Yeah, similar to Dogma, I assume. I mean, Ben Affleck isn't the same either. Yeah.
Well, fun fact: he's not the angel.
Who knows? Maybe he dies and
Only.
gets reincarnated.
Well, you see, later he would go on to play Batman, so they kind of reference that in this movie too. The comic credits.
I'd like to see a Kevin Smith Batman movie now.
He was a mall fucker. Phantoms. Phantoms like a mall.
He kind of did see a Kevin Smith.
I'm not going to edit this video. Like I gave up on editing those kind of discussions. So just no, don't be sorry to me. It's just whatever you put out there, it's going to be out there. Like
I'm
your
sorry.
responsibility. I don't care about.
I'm sorry. I'm just quoting Kevin Smith movies. If you don't know the quotes, it's not my fault.
I highly recommend Orson, since you said coming into this that Dogma was the top Kevin Smith film you watched. Continuing, whether we move forward with watching these Smith films and movie clubs or not, working within his catalog, because when he works with George Carlin, that's one of my favorite interactions. He talked about on a YouTube video where Kevin Smith did, where he's reflecting on all these movies he made, how George, even if it was a bit role, would really want to understand the character. So moving from working with Smith on Dogma to the character that George Carlin plays in Jay and Silent Bob, it's a minor character, but George Carlin built an entire backstory for this character to the point that Smith actually thought that he could use the ending of Dogma to revive Carlin's character, and he just fell on hard times, ending up in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Ooh. Seeing the path that some of these actors take in different roles is brilliant. And even though Jay and Silent Bob isn't a classy Pinky's Out movie, the way that he utilizes every actor, from George Carlin to Eliza Dushku to Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, and that was when Carrie Fisher was semi-retired. It's absolutely wonderful.
Okay, hush you. You're the movie's okay, like, yeah, hush you. One, if we do Jay and Silent Bob, I am going to make Torsten watch the Muppet movie beforehand.
I think I've watched the movie. I have 2 kids. Like I'm sure I watched the Muppet movie.
If you don't watch a George Carlin movie where he's like playing the background to a slacker duo, you watch Bill and Ted.
But is that role better than the role he plays in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back?
I mean,
okay, he's getting more to do in Jay and Silent Bob, but let's face it, like he's part of the Bill and Ted stuff. Like he gets them like.
He's Rufus.
He does.
He's Rufus. Also,
he's as important as Death is, if you know what that means.
Also, I feel bad because, well, I'm actually excited because Torsten has not experienced the best of Kevin Smith yet. And man,
I watched the Masters of the Universe.
I was going to say, Clerks, the animated series, is peak.
It needs a remaster. I have the old thick complete collection set, but Smith has said at conventions that there are storyboards and cinematics that were not included on that set. I want to see what we missed out on.
So, because now we're just kind of rambling, but I'll ramble. What's great about that show is on ABC Family, for whatever godforsaken reason, Jay and Silent Bob aren't drug dealers. They sell they're just like hoodlums who sell fireworks. But what's weird is that show had so many limitations on it, it then became funnier. Because like episode 2, like in old TV shows, they do like flashbacks and clips episodes. Like, remember that time we blah, 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 and they would like show an old episode, Torsten? They did that in episode 2. So it was all just referencing episode 1. But it's like, it sounds weird, but it's like some of the funniest, like this, the delivery on the jokes where you're like, you guys know comedy. This is great. This is brilliant.
There's a bear driving the car.
I have to think that whoever commissioned Smith for that cartoon must have been taking shrooms or LSD, because there is no way his humor equates to a proper children's cartoon.
Dude,
Bless.
Johnny the homicidal maniac gave us Invader Zim.
God bless Animaniacs and the pig in the road for getting crap past the radar.
I guess at this time also stuff wasn't researchable unless like you just went by the numbers. Like, oh, there he had a successful movie. let's make a TV show off of this.
I guess we could make the argument that it would have worked because 80s action movies weren't appropriate. Some of the 90s weren't either, and yet we had Rambo and RoboCop as cartoons.
And also 90s cartoons. Like cartoons were
James
just like
Bond
whatever you put
Jr.
into those cartoons, cartoons are for kids no matter what you put in there. Like I mean, we talked about some in the past, like they are not I mean, I saw also German movies, some of them with validate, but just because it's a cartoon doesn't mean it's a kid's movie.
You know, ooh, I might want to make Torsten watch Wizards.
I thought you already have.
You
No,
tried.
Do you not tie into a chair and say watch Wizards?
no, Torsten, do not look it up. Do not look it up. Do me that favor. Just do not look it up. Trust me on this. Going blind. I see you typing. Stop typing. You're looking. Why are you looking?
Wizards
Is that
TV
your movie club nomination for your birthday month, Josh?
Tales of Arcadia. That's 2020. That's a very recent TV show.
Yeah,
Netflix,
that one.
that's
Yeah,
probably
that's
not the
That's exactly
not
what
the
I'm
one.
talking about. Stop looking. That's exactly
Okay.
what. Don't worry about it.
You know, 2020. Oh, no, nothing that obscure.
Yeah, that it's clearly that one. Yeah, nothing else.
Nothing else to do with the place of Waverly either. So
That actually came back.
on the right track.
Yeah, it did. It's off to an interesting start.
No, the night like granted it's like the nostalgia, I'm getting older, but there is something about the 90s, like it was just such a weird, and I feel like we're slowly getting out of the 80s like nostalgia. We're slowly about to enter the 90s. But like the 90s, I don't know if you can replicate even like nostalgia bay because it was such a weird time period.
That's what we're
It's
saying.
like we already
the-
hit the 90s nostalgia.
Oh yeah, 90s nostalgia was in the when was 90s nostalgia around 2000,
Like 10 years ago.
8, yeah, 20 almost. Yeah, I think right now it's like there's like late odds, early 10 like 2010s is currently reviving too.
We're now
I
getting
guess.
nostalgic over iPods, for heaven's sake.
We're at the point where the Daredevil, Ben Affleck Daredevil, that is, movie is considered beloved by the
That
fans.
is a work of classic, and I have that as well.
Well, if it's
I
the
did enjoy
director's
that
cut, I
movie.
can see it. That's another one where it's like the director's cut versus theatrical, like which is better. That could be its own discussion.
We can see what we're gonna watch in discuss in March, because all of you're here. You have to commit. Like you're gonna be back in February. I know Steve will. I know James will. Brand and Josh, you gotta at least watch. Let's say 3 or 4 movies of whatever is gonna be nominated for the Oscars for
That's
next
Friday.
September.
Fingers crossed
Yeah.
for Substance and Honora.
It's the Oscars. I just call that my free pass if I can show up or not. Because
No,
like,
there's no free pass. No.
It's actually the only.
I wasn't-
It's the only one that almost saw it for.
I do
listen,
not
I'm
think-
calling the Godzilla -1 rule. I don't have to be there if Godzilla isn't on the table.
I do not think that we'll have films as polarizing as Anatomy of a Fall or Maestro, but I get the sinking feeling in my gut that Amelia Perez movie that everyone hates
haven't seen that one yet.
is going to get nominated for the Oscar. I have put off watching that film,
Yeah, I haven't either.
and will continue to do so unless it becomes part of Movie Club. But
I'm
the
sure
way
it,
things are going, we've got a pretty damn good slate of films that could get nominated between Wicked and Nosferatu, Honora, The Substance.
I
Red
say if
One.
Nosferatu's on there, and I hope it is, I would be glad to talk about that.
Red one's gonna sweep everything.
So the plan is similar to last year, as we discussed for the December movie club, right, Torsen, where we're going to do the regular February, then we move into Oscars, then we move into March.
Oh no, I don't think there's time for a normal regular February. So then the February one will be the Oscars one, probably the last week of February to give everyone time to watch the 10 movies that will be nominated. By the time we meet, the Oscars are pretty early there. I think March 2nd, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, fourth week in March.
So we gotta
I get to
make
nominate
sure
for March then, since February is my birthday month?
Yeah, it's my birthday month too, so we can both of us nominate something and we'll just take over March.
Whoa. I vote the Oscars are your birthday month. You're strong arming us into the Oscars.
But no, listen to this. If Omar is going to be stubborn, one of my nominations is going to be The Proposal, just to force his ass to watch The Proposal.
He won't show up for this.
But you gotta put it, you gotta. The only movie club Omar is showing up for is the Oscars, which means next month.
You know what I am excited for about the Oscars? We're getting the old Torsen back. New Torsen's been kind of lame. Old Torsen, he's like, I'm going to watch all these movies. I'm going to read all the books. I'm going to do all the research. New Torsen's like, yeah, I'm going to watch the wrong version of Mallrats.
I trust the people here that usually know.
I'm just saying, the last couple movies, you used to like watch, we used to have to stop you, be like, do not watch all the versions of The Crow.
Well, it's not based on a novel, is it? I went back and I did watch Clerks. That was my prep work.
My first time on here was John Carpenter's The Thing, and it became not John Carpenter's The Thing they were talking about, but the comics, the video game, the prequel, sequel, Thing from Another World. Who goes there?
I was gonna say, who goes there?
Honestly, Torsen, there wasn't much homework for you to do. If we were moving from Mallrats to Dogma, that's one thing, because Clerks, Mallrats, Dogma, they all connect fairly well through the comics that are difficult to track down, as well as Chasing Amy, because they've got that Chasing Dogma comic that was published. But all you need to do really was reflect on the events of Clerks in order to fully appreciate Mallrats.
I will say this. We're all adults. We've all seen enough movies, like consumed enough media. You don't need everything explained out, because I've read like that Chasing Dogma. It's not as exciting. It's like, you can skip it.
It's not. It's just kind of a fun little excerpt in the greater scheme of this mythos.
And me, I can watch Mallrats standalone without even having to watch Clerks before or after and be fine.
Like
my thing though is like, oh wow, I forgot the extended cut existed until 3 hours ago after watching it like 10 years ago. So I'm like, oh, what are you guys talking about with editing? Like, I look back at extended cut, like, oh yeah, you guys watched the wrong cut of the movie.
And Torsen is a man of culture anyway, so even if he doesn't do every bit of research equated to a full understanding of a film, he doesn't need to watch Total Recall to understand the importance of the topless psychic. Or
I did
3 nipples. Well, to be fair, the Total Recall is 3 boobs, important, not 3 nipples.
Also,
there's still 3 nipples involved in Total Recall.
Fair enough, but there's at least a triple boob.
I keep forgetting to look it up because I swear she's like a famous actress. I did
forget to look that up too.
So it's famous now.
Yeah, true. I always feel like it's this. Kevin Smith had like a crush on her, so all of a sudden it's like, so I need you to do a topless scene for the art.
To be fair, the studio also mandated there be a topless scene involving Joey Lauren Adams. So,
yeah,
executive meddling at it again.
I was gonna say that's the other thing with this movie, because there's Gwen with the random like tit shot. It's like, oh yeah, radar movie used to have X amount of boob shots.
Or curse word. That was also a thing too.
Then the
if it was rated R, it had to have at least more than 2 F words at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which just have Jason Munez in a movie.
Hmm.
So okay, I guess we're doing the Oscars. Then Torsten and Steven's pick, and then we'll
Gotta
go from
decide
there.
if we do a theme. I believe one idea was like the original and remake combination. If we want to go down that road, each of us
Which I'm fine
depending
with.
one,
We could
or
do
just
RoboCop. We could do Total Recall.
You can do Jay and Silent Bob.
Heh. God, what's another?
That actress, by the way, is Priscilla Barnes.
Scarface.
I just looked her up. She was Terry Alden on Three's Company.
That's I almost guarantee it. That's why. Like, it always.
Smith is a huge Three's Company fan, so that explains it.
And don't get me
Good
wrong.
show.
She's attractive in the role. It just always felt to me. I'm like, this felt like you had X amount of money and you're fulfilling some kind of like. It's like, wait, I can. Same with like Stan Lee. It's like, wait a minute, how much money can I spend on meeting Stan Lee?
it's
I'm
very
sure that might be
likely.
part of it, but I'm sure part of it is also because funny.
We all have someone that if we were making a movie, we would probably want to work with.
Fair enough.
So, which one was it again that he took the loan for? That was Clerks.
That was Clerks.
Clerks.
Yeah.
Because Clerks, he maxed out all of his credit cards.
And Soul's Comic Collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, Torsten, have you watched a lot of Bruce Campbell's films and stuff like that?
I would have to look it up because I don't know what his collection entailed.
Evil Dead, Bubba Hotep.
So Evil Dead would be good for a remake versus original.
Oh, I'm not watching
because
that
I love them
remake.
both.
Oof, I am not watching that remake. I couldn't get through the trailer.
Yeah, no, I have not.
I just want an excuse to talk about Evil Dead. I swear I try and nominate these one of those movies at least like
Guys.
every month.
Guys.
So
Guys, I know he technically started this. We have to get rid of Torsten because he doesn't know Bruce Campbell.
you
If
realize
we-
the mic is on, right?
If we
I'm
did,
well aware, hence the joke.
if we did Evil Dead, though, would we incorporate the short film that is the prequel and then also talk about Evil Dead 2, which is basically a soft remake of
Maybe.
Evil Dead?
But
The TV
sorry,
series is better than the movies.
technically it's a continuation. Sorry, my original point for bringing all this up, Torsten. He does an autobiography, like if Chins will kill. They always have random names, like Chins will kill, Bruce, making love with Bruce Campbell way. If you're, if anyone, if you're a big like movie fan, I recommend listening to those because especially the first one, he talks about all the like they technically committed fraud to make Evil Dead. Like there are certain things where it's like can't do that nowadays.
Nope. That's late 70s, early 80s filmmaking for you.
I'm looking at the filmography and lots of, I don't know what he worked on in those, but like there's always a different directors listed.
He's he worked a
Like,
lot.
he's not he's doing some directing, but not on, like he's listed for Spider-Man 2 and 3, but clearly he wasn't the director on those.
No, he's technically he was in all three. He's okay. Evil Dead was directed by his friend Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi's the same guy who directed all these Spider-Man movies.
For the first trilogy.
Yeah. He knows like the Coen brothers. The crazy thing is like he was up for the role for the Phantom, didn't get it. He's like one of our like darling actors. It's just weird. He kind of fell into all these B roles, which he loves to do. And then he took off with Burn Notice was like his first kind of big takeoff. Well, yeah, I regret. Technically, Xena was like the first takeoff, but then like Burn Notice was the next one.
Burn Notice was the one he was really put into the public eye for because Xena, as big as it got, it was still
Niche.
kind of a niche.
Yeah.
show.
And the Avengers of Briscoe County.
Oh, I love that too.
And it's also
I watched like one or two episodes of Burn Notice, never really liked it. But I'm looking at the guy, I'm like, he does not look familiar at all.
He's a cool dude, and he's one of those people that is willing to take on the bullying that comes from it. That was one of the inspirations behind the book turned movie My Name is Bruce, was addressing the criticism he received from people who want serious actors involved in films.
Also, he's just a funny guy.
Also, best narrator in video games or tutorials, because Spider-Man 2, he will just like show up and do narration for like instant tips in the game, and while he's eating a sandwich, or just ad-libbing really, not
So
even
you hear
following
the
like the
chewing.
script of what it says.
Also,
Like, like actually eating the sandwich as like he's narrating like on screen. Like, okay, if you want to press jump, that's a good sandwich. Anyways, you press jump, press this button.
If you're looking for a fun done in one collected edition that deals with horror and military, Bruce Campbell wrote a stellar Sergeant Rock miniseries that got collected as well.
it's really also the whole like gimmick, go out in the cabin, evil like presence or ghosts, like you resurrect like an evil spirit. They started that with Evil Dead. They were the first ones to do that. Because also, like, and I agree with James, Evil Dead, the TV show, is amazing. It's not better than the films.
Yes, it is.
One, Army of Darkness, two, you technically need to watch the films, but you don't have
No, you
to.
don't.
But
No.
See,
Thorson
technically, you
gave me
don't even need
power
to
so I
watch
can
the
kick
first
this man
one
out.
because 2 recaps the first one in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, but Army of Darkness, that's a film. Oh, that was one of my favorite films, especially all the random quotes. Good, bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
I'm glad we went down this path because I think the way that they're continuing Bruce Campbell and Evil Dead for Ash's story is the route I would prefer if there's much delay still, that Kevin Smith continue Mallrats, because Ash versus Evil Dead is coming back as an adult animated series.
Maybe.
We're not going to be able to keep these actors around for Mallrats forever. They've been on the hook for this sequel since, like I said, 2012. We've already lost Shannon Daltrey. The least you could do if people start retiring from physicality in acting is do an adult animated series or something like that.
He was not
Also-
in Mallrats, though, no?
What's that?
He was not in Mallrats.
No, we just kind of went down the rabbit hole.
I brought him up because you asked about how it was like the funding for Clerks. I brought up Bruce
Gotcha.
Campbell because the whole like they committed fraud. Like,
Ah. Gotcha.
It's
Thorson,
hilarious.
I'm a web of rabbit holes. I can
Yeah,
get you
like-
any topic.
I was just debating if we should go down that rabbit hole or not, but
It's
then we're
Bruce
not talking
Campbell.
about Clerks.
It's Bruce Campbell. You always go down that rabbit hole.
What's his
If-
essential on the way?
If you want to watch a modern Kevin Smith film, I believe it came out in 2023, or it might have even been last year, 2024. I only recently bought the Blu-ray because it was on sale for $10 on Amazon. The 4:30 movie is a semi-autobiographical film about Kevin Smith and what inspired him to enter the world of cinematography and directing.
Not to mention, his
Really?
stand-up is hilarious.
It's his new movie,
What's that called?
410.
Is it 4:10 or is it 4:30? I can't get the time right on it. Jake.
I'll find out.
Thank you. Sorry. I don't think I have that sitting nearby.
Kevin Smith. Well,
4:30. Last year, 2024.
It was.
It
really
take place
good.
before. It take place in the same universe.
also, what's kind of weird because the Skewiverse, it was kind of fun because it was like little Easter. Like you didn't need to watch like Mallrats to get Clerks. None of this. Yeah, because the extended. Wait a minute. So the extended version doesn't have the girl dying from doing all the laps.
No, it doesn't
Got nothing.
reference it at all.
The closest reference
got-
you
it
get
has-
is then driving past the quick stop. That's it.
It seems to have half an hour more, but none of the important stuff that was taken out. So it has 1 hour more and a good half an hour taken out.
Interesting. Yeah, it's
Why would anyone do that, right?
well, I think the other problem is I think the studios kind of assumed like Kevin Smith was a little bit more mature in his filmmaking career. Because granted, it's like, every project you learn and grow. I do feel like with Kevin Smith, like there's a bunch of things with Mallrats, he kind of learned like, okay, I'll never do this again. And I think like having a tighter script was one of the first things he learned. So it is because I think like the theatrical cut, well, it was a godsend because yeah, I think someone getting a different editor to kind of go in there and be like, okay, we need this works better here. Let's do this.
How much was he under time pressure to make this? Like, it's a year after Clerks. You mentioned that the script was written in like fortnight. And
it was like one weekend that he had to
Oh,
this.
yeah.
That's what it'll be.
I think, I mean, I could double check. He's like mid-20s. He's in his 20s too. So that says a lot where it's like,
so it's not necessarily that he needs to learn much. It's just this movie wasn't set up for, he wasn't set up for. So whoever put that time restriction on him, like, you have to do this quick because you got the budget now, I guess, and got to release this next year. And this has to be, or in a few months, and this has to come out. I don't know if that's how it was, but it feels like it because the other writing felt like
that was Universal,
coherent.
And the fact that he and his partner, Scott Mosier, had found success, but they didn't have that strength yet within the industry to really push back against the studio and say, no, we need more time. So it was Universal basically saying, let's strike while the iron is hot. Your name's out there. Get this put together. Do it now.
All the production issues too, especially with almost them recasting Jason Mewes.
Yeah, that and the fact that it was supposed to be filmed in New Jersey and Universal said, no, we're not filming in Jersey. It's too expensive. And they moved him to Michigan last minute.
Michigan and California, right? Like they did California and Michigan. Like I figure this would blow up the budget even more if you have to move everything into 3 different states.
I'm not. There's a speculation. I don't have this for fact. It's also back then it was a little bit more known. Like a producer would buy a house, shoot a movie in that house, and then keep said house. Like that was a little bit more common. So it's like it might have been like shooting in California. They got some kind of kickback. Like you don't like I said, could be wrong, but it's like I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like that. Allegedly.
It's a little bit easier it's difficult, but it's also a little bit easier in this day and age if you've established yourself in the industry, because now Kevin Smith could probably go into a mall and say, hey, I'd like to use the mall, and it'd be a Christmas movie. All they would have to do to accommodate is, if the movie's filming in March for the next Christmas season, is leave the decorations up a little bit longer. That's what happened with Jon Favreau when he was filming Elf, because he established himself within the industry. With the way Smith wanted to film it, it was in a very traffic heavy mall, so he wasn't able to really convince Universal that it was worth investing the money instead of moving into this pretty much vacant mall in Michigan. It still sucks though, because one of the pieces of charm that flows throughout a lot of his films that take place in Jersey is he incorporates the state and its landscapes into those films.
But as we learned 2 hours ago, nowadays the malls are also more empty, so this would be way more doable nowadays.
Well, and also,
that too.
It's also, it's like, unless it's a very specific mall, it's a mall. So it's like, you're not going to have all those like
all the same.
Yeah.
All the same blueprint. But yeah, I can see the outside. Like, yeah, there was a few outside scenes, and it felt also very disconnected. That old mall, that old school, smaller, rundown place, that felt like completely. Maybe that's also a different state. Maybe those are the seats they had somewhere else because they're completely disconnected.
Oh, it's just like Torsen, you with your list being like dirt mall, unbelievable.
Well, I mean, like that's the flea market. That's like
Not
The
unbelievable,
lesser
but
malls, but like it's an extra place.
That was
it didn't
huge.
feel like it's like a block down or 2 blocks down from the other place. It felt like a different state.
That was huge on the East Coast, though. In the 90s, you would have a mall set up, and then either a block away or a couple blocks away, you would have a flea market, and
Yeah,
it
that's
was
like
the mall allowing the flea market to take place.
You know what's
that's
interesting?
Ohio with Caesar's Creek and Trader's World.
You don't get a lot of
I've heard
car
of them.
shots. You don't get a lot of car scenes in this movie either.
No, you don't.
Because usually they'd have at least like a B-roll of them like driving or something, which you didn't get.
And even the vehicles you do see, you can make the excuse that were this film today, people, especially younger people, are into the retro vehicles.
Also, we kind of brought up briefly, but yeah, I'm curious if they do make a Mallrats 2, if Trish the Dish comes back or if like they mention her.
I would imagine it'd be like an Easter egg about like, oh, her book's sold and she's like off doing whatever. I imagine they would probably stay away from referencing that as much as they possibly could. Or like a blink and you miss it, like nod to it.
Because like I said, when I first watched it, I was around her age. So I was like, oh, I don't see a problem with this. Yeah, watching this again, it's like, oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah,
That's why I
I
was
forgot
like-
about that too
Yeah.
as I watched it. I was like, oh boy,
she's in
I can't defend that.
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back very briefly, but they don't really touch as much on where she is in her life as they do, say, Brody, who's owning the comic book store.
The only thing I could say that's any kind of defense for it is like it was written in 1995 when that was more like ha ha funny, and nowadays it'd be more like probably not. No, don't do that.
So I don't want to hear anyone complaining about Taxi Driver. That was 2 decades before Mallrats even, and like you all had problems with Jodie Foster. Not all, but
I will say, like I was probably the one that was like with Thorson. They're like, you know what? It makes sense why that's a part of the movie.
I will
I
say
wanted to go to the
this.
taxi driver again.
I'll say this. Trish was in charge. She was making money. She was just way too young.
And I think that's the main difference. Thank you, Josh, is the fact that Jodie Foster was basically portrayed as a victim in Taxi Driver, even though
no, because she had a chance to get out and she decided
she
not
had the
to.
chance. She just refused to do so, and yet she is seen by modern film examiners who are looking at it from a modern perspective as a victim. I don't see her as a victim when I watch that movie. Trish is fully empowered in Mallrats.
She was made a victim by the actions that Robert De Niro's character takes and like murders her whole environment, whether that was toxic to her or not, but like it was still traumatizing for her. So anyhow.
That's the thing. Like everybody in Taxi Driver is surrounded by a whole lot of like bad shit going on. So it's not like just central to one character. They're all their own victims in their own stories, essentially.
I think the other thing with Jodie's character, that was just very raw. Like that was a very like real, like, because I'm like, this feels like it could be a lot of like actual people. Trish, like every character in Mallrats is cartoony in a certain sense. Like they have human emotions, but they do feel like cartoons where it's like, even like
Gil Hicks is like a cartoon.
that man is a genius. He is a pillar.
The fact that they make him Dante's cousin, I think he's his cousin, is absolutely hilarious. The fact that that actor can basically portray the same character just with subtle differences in personality, it's wonderful. Whereas Dante is not self-assured at all. Gil's very steadfast in what he believes, and he's kind of a pansy, whereas Dante, despite acting like a coward, stands up for what he actually believes in. And
was he supposed to be here today?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Gil is staunchly wanting to be on that stage.
Also,
He's
isn't
afraid to ask questions that he probably shouldn't have asked Brody.
because isn't Walter like, wasn't Walter one of the guys at from the comic book shop? Like that name comes up again. Like in other movies, I swear.
I think he says Walt like 2 times. He says Walt in response to like his cousin Walter, and
Well,
then Walt is the guy he says hi to when he's at the strip mall. He goes,
I
"Hey,
thought-
Walt, like say they love me here."
okay, because yeah, cousin Walter in the theatrical is the gerbil bit, and in the plane bit,
hmm
I swear, like they use the name like Walter like a bunch in the other films. Like I swear it's like a common like thread.
I think the Walt was like supposed to be like a nod to Walt Flanagan. In that case was like, "Hey, he's like the comic book shop boy." He's like, "Hey, they love me here."
But he's in the movie too. He's like
Because
Walter Flanagan is in Mallrats as Grover, fanboy Grover, like in the
yeah,
And
'Cause
he's
he's the
in
one-
Dogma as one of the anti-abortionists too. Very brief, but still hilarious.
because yeah, he's one of those guys where it's like he's part of the View Askew-verse because I think he does more behind the scenes, but he'll always pop up for like a random bit.
Yeah, his character Walt Grover has been in a couple films, but he was also Steve Dave in a couple films, and I don't remember if he played the same. No, he didn't play the same character in the Clerks animated series, but he did voice work for several people in the.
No, he is the Walt Grover is in Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Jane Silent Bob Strike Back, and in the animated series.
Thank you.
Gotta love the internet.
Sometimes an accurate sources of information. Other times
Yeah.
it's not.
Sometimes we get lost.
As long as you don't use AI and all the wrong information comes back, like you got to do that exercise. It's a topic that you know 100% know what you're talking about. Ask AI and see how the wrong information gets put back to you. It's like even citing the right source, but still making the wrong conclusion. It's like, ooh,
I can't wait for
so
YouTube
bad.
AI to figure out how to summarize this 3-hour long movie club.
That's the good part. 3
They
hours
like
is
the
too
movie
long
or
for
not?
them.
I don't know.
It's had a time limit.
Also, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yeah, I've noticed a lot more people are like, I input this in chat, or I asked this about Chat GPT. I'm like, ew, that's okay. Like, that's not the supercomputer you think it is.
I haven't checked the AI summary for Cats Don't Dance. I think it would be hilarious if it says Steve thinks Danny is a dick.
It just says the speaker says, and it's usually just points to me like the speaker likes this movie and thinks it's underappreciated. Then they also say the speaker doesn't like this movie and thinks Danny's a dick, and it goes to Josh.
Josh thinks Cats Don't Dance is more brilliant than Feladay.
Also, the one from Dusk Till Dawn and The Mummy was also weird because I thought we were comparing the two movies at the same time. Like we weren't talking about which one was better. We're just talking about the movies.
Yeah, no, that was.
But The Mummy's better.
Yeah, but it isn't.
From Dusk Till Dawn. Somehow that'll be on this algorithm too. Like, yeah, we'll talk about Mallrats, and then they also agreed on this.
We'll be back next week where we discuss which of the 10 movies that will be nominated this Friday. By the time this stream here gets released, those will be out already because I'm not going to be able to release this by Friday. So for everyone watching this, nominations will be out. We'll be discussing those at the end of February. You guys are all committed to being there, whether you watch them all or just a couple, doesn't matter.
Where are we? Where are we going?
I want to remind you, Josh, that in the first Oscars movie club, you were there and you haven't watched a single one of those 10 and you were still there. So we're going to go on a tour with Steve right now.
I was just worried it would be the bathroom. I'm just happy we went down the stairs. Also, because once again, to pick on Torsten, remember when old Torsten would have backgrounds for the movies? Could have had old mall shots.
I don't have time to upload that right now. But
Orson, if you had that scene where Brody is up against the display in the candy store with his nose bleeding, that would have been the perfect background for you. Just you
could have had like the what was it, the blue bag of like the chocolate covered pretzels in the background?
It's a white bag.
Yeah, is it blue or white? I forget what it
white.
is. But yeah.
Or in the background, Brody is shaking Michael Rooker's hand with Torsen smiling in the foreground.
Can't wait to see what the thumbnail looks like.
You know what's crazy too? Speaking of comics, because you then had Rooker later on being Walking Dead, then being Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep, and probably better now know for being Yondu.
Shit, John, why do you have to go down that rabbit hole?
It's so about that.
Because that comic
it's a shooter.
That comic store scene is that comic store scene is actually referenced in Invincible, which ironically is written by Robert Kirkman, who used Michael Rooker in his adaptation of his other comic, The Walking Dead. There's a scene in Invincible where Mark Grayson is talking to this gentleman who looks suspiciously like Brian Michael Bendis about the same sorts of things that Brody would have, if he were more appropriate, talked to Stan Lee about in comics.
I'm just glad we picked the movie with the thing's dong. Is that made out of rock?
Apparently, according to Stan Lee, I guess the answer is, well, I imagine it's the same all over. So,
well, according to fans, the thing does get rock hard. Maybe that's part of it.
And with that, and the non-sailboat in the background that I managed to put up, we'll see.
I'm the problem. I'm the problem.
Next month.
It turns out Thorson was a sailboat all
along. Yeah, there you go.
It was Agatha all along.
Next month, where we discuss the 10 nominated movies for Best Picture at the Oscars, end of February. I'm looking forward to that one. It will be a marathon to get through, but I'm looking forward to it. I want to say thank you for discussing Mallrats with you guys. Thank you, Brand, Steve, Josh, and James. We'll see each other in a few weeks.